Always fun every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock, Monday, the 4th of November. Is it?
December.
No, December.
That was a trick.
I was going to say 4th of November. No, that isn't right.
We've got the trees up a bit early then, in that case.
It is only 6 o'clock.
Oh, bear with us.
Oh, dear me. This is Breakfast with Stephen Dixon. We rehearsed this as well. I probably just said it then. This is Breakfast with Stephen Dixon and Isabel Webster.
And here's what's leading the news this morning. A renewed push from Conservatives to reduce migration as a new poll reveals nearly two-thirds of voters believe current migration is too high.
Well, it comes as another 519 migrants crossed the Channel this weekend with no end in sight to illegal crossings.
Frosty weather has whipped up chaos across the UK as thousands are without power as the Met Office is issuing more snow and ice warnings. Ellie Glaister will have the latest throughout the morning.
It's been a cloudy and wet start to the day for many of us, with sleet and snow in places. Join me later for the full forecast with all the details.
Has COP28 been a cop-out? The UAE is under fire as the organising president says there's no science behind demands for the phasing out of fossil fuels.
A renewed focus on southern Gaza as Israel increases their operations in the area, and the US is stressing the moral responsibility to protect civilians.
Paul Coyte's got all the sport for you this morning.
I do. Good morning. 24. It's a golf fest. It was a golf fest yesterday. 24. Have I got a tree over my shoulder?
Yes, you have.
I have a feeling this is a tree over my shoulder. 24 goals in 5 Premier League games yesterday, including 6 that were shared at the Etihad between Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester City. And Ronnie O'Sullivan becomes both the youngest and the oldest UK snooker champion.
Ooh, intriguing.
Ooh.
Well, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you throughout the morning. You can email us, gbnews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet or X us at gbnews.
Yeah, let us know what the weather's like where you are this morning. We're talking about the big freeze a little bit later on, well, in just a few minutes, actually.
Up where your folks are?
Yeah, up in Cumbria.
Are they all right?
It's really bad. Well, they're in Spain.
Oh, right.
So at the minute, so that's fine.
Then.
But everyone else, all the rest of the family, yeah it's really, really bad.
Yeah.
So if you're stuck in that, troubled by that, let us know.
Yeah,
Send in the pictures.
We'll get you on telly this morning. We would love to talk to you and hear from you because...
Are you taking the mick out of my accent?
No, I'm embracing it.
Cheek.
Oh, dear.
No, I love it.
I can't help it.
The more northern you come, the better it is.
So, yeah, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll put you on the airwaves this morning because we want to hear from people affected by the really bad weather.
Yeah. But our main news so far this morning, at least, the Conservatives are losing voters to, well, of all people, sort of, Nigel Farage over the migration crisis. That's according to new polling, with Reform UK, which is what used to be the Brexit Party, and Nigel's honorary president of that, consistently polling in double digits for the first time.
This is all according to a new poll from BMG. It's being reported in the Independent newspaper today. It's revealed 63% of all voters believe net migration is actually too high, and that Tory voters now believe reducing both illegal and legal migration is more important than and growing the economy.
Yeah, it comes as over the weekend another 519 migrants crossed the Channel in small boats, bringing the total number of illegal crossings this year to just over 29,000.
So just how big a problem is migration for the Conservatives as they begin to bleed votes to both the left and the right?
Well, our head of digital news, Dan Falvey, joins us in the studio this morning. Good to see you, Dan. I mean, this is problematic, particularly for the Tories, isn't it? Because as this issue splits the sort of vote to the right, what it does is open up the door to the left, of course.
Absolutely. But this shouldn't come as a surprise to the Conservatives. This has been an issue now for a long time, and that 29,000 mark that we hit in terms of small boats over the weekend means that we have now surpassed the total number of crossings for 2021, which means that it is the second highest year on record for small boat crossings. It continues to be a huge problem. The Conservatives have tried to address this for a number of years. They keep saying they've got these plans to reduce illegal migration. They talk about taking tough measures to bring down legal migration too. And yet what we see is the numbers continue to go up and up and up. OK, illegal migration may have stalled slightly. It may no longer be going up, but it's not exactly coming down at a particularly tall rate.
And when it comes to legal migration, where those figures have caused an awful lot of hoo-ha, why don't they just stop issuing visas? Why don't they put a cap on it, a hard cap?
So the problem that the Conservatives have got is that we've got the issue that we do not necessarily have the skills base currently to fill all the jobs that we did have migrants doing who were from the EU. Now, the government talks tough about how it wants in a number of years to bring in and make it so that our homegrown talent can do that, but you can't just do that overnight. For example, trying to be a doctor or nurse takes a number of years.
I think that's what's interesting about the polling on the front of the Eye today, and this is the fact that people are saying actually getting a grip of migration is more important to a lot of people than growing the economy, but actually legal migration is helping the economy. If we were to suddenly turn those taps off, and this is why you have this tension between the Home Office and the Treasury, because if you turn those taps off, the economy would be in an even worse state.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, by the way, just to point out, just in terms of how much people care, I was looking, doing my digital role, I was taking a look earlier on about how much people are searching Google about immigration. And what you see is, in 2020, there's a right drop-off after we left the EU, and that has started to creep up and up and up. And there's actually around as much search in immigration as there's an income tax. As much as we talk about how much people want to hear about the economy, people are looking all the time for migration as well, because they see them as being just as important.
There's talk in some of the papers this morning, and Rishi Sunak has sort of addressed it slightly. It's frankly a ridiculous idea of saying, could Nigel Farage, if he went back to frontline politics, join the Conservative Party and sort of unite the vote? Now, Rishi Sunak said, well, we're a broad church, so sort of not excluding it. I mean, it's very, very unlikely to happen, isn't it? But nevertheless, it does go to show that somehow they've got to try and pull these people, if they want to stay in power, pull these people back.
Well, it's quite a way we've come, isn't it, from when you think about when David Cameron was in charge of the Conservative Party, he decided that all of UKIP were fruitcakes and loonies. That now that we're saying that actually no, Farage, that he'd be welcome back in, is what Rishi Sunak's saying. I think it also shows, though, just how nervous he is about that pull to the right and trying to make sure that he looks like he is that leader for that side of the party. I suppose,
and what a broad church that the party tries to be, but obviously that results quite often in splits right up to the very top. We're seeing that in Cabinet. There's ongoing sort of question over how they solve the problem, whether they persevere with this Rwanda policy. And I think it's in the Times this morning, they're quoting officials within the Home Office, the civil servants, saying this is a political gimmick that is wasting everybody's time and you can't legislate your way out of a Supreme Court judgment.
Yeah, so we're expecting that there could be a new deal with Rwanda unveiled in the coming days, and emergency legislation could be announced by the end of the week. That could then be in place by February or March time, but whether that actually then does anything is yet to be seen. We've seen plenty of times that the government has announced new legislation to tackle migration, and then they announce new legislation to tackle migration.
And money.
And more money, because every time it doesn't work. The one thing that might be different for them here, and what they might be hoping, is if they introduce this legislation on Thursday, as is being expected, and it doesn't therefore get through the House of Commons and the House of Lords till the end of February, it's going to be coming into place very close to an election, i.e. it might allow the Prime Minister to go to the country saying, look at this grand plan that I've put into place, now vote me back in, without having for the public to actually see whether it works or not before they vote.
And the problem with that is, for the Tories at least, that they'll go back on his previous record. And one of the key pledges, of course, was to stop the boats by the end of the year, which, as we started off by saying, clearly isn't happening.
Yeah, I mean, it is lower this year than last year, but I think there was also some people say that is because the weather this summer wasn't as good, which meant that there wasn't as many crossings. So what would be interesting would be if the government decided to hold off on an election until next autumn, i.e. after the summer. If we had a summer of good weather, did the crossings go up again? And that's why there was a lot of speculation that he may go for that May election rather than holding off till the autumn.
Yeah, OK. Dan, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Talking of the weather.
Yes, let's focus on it now, shall we? Wild weather is causing havoc across the country over the weekend. The community of Beeston, Nottinghamshire, is in shock after a homeless man froze to death and actually had to be cut from his car by firefighters.
Horrific, isn't it? Well, an investigation is underway after police were called to the scene with reports the man was using the car as a shelter.
And all of this comes after a stretch of icy cold weather resulted in more than 2,500 people in Cumbria being without electricity.
Well, Cumbria's Fire and Rescue Service says it worked through the night to rescue drivers from cars who were trapped in deep snow.
And the Met Office has issued a fourth yellow weather warning for heavy rain that will last until 6 o'clock this evening.
Yeah, apparently rain is likely to cause some disruption to travel as well and could result in some flooding. There's an added problem.
Just to add to the fun, well, let's speak to the meteorologist John Hammond, who joins us this morning from Upper Wensleydale, I believe. Good morning to you. Just bring us up to date then on how bad it is, because I think it could be quite a sort of ice rink of a commute for a lot of people this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's snowing like Billy-O outside here, as it is across other parts of northern England, particularly higher level routes. The focus now is to higher places because the air actually is not as cold as it was a couple of days ago, as warm air, wet air is trying to push up from the south. In fact, much of southern England is at 8 or 9 degrees and it's rain that we've got to worry about. The nation is divided actually at the moment between cold air, which is still locked across sort of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, where we've got those sort of ice rink conditions, and further south where it's a really soggy do. And in between the cold and the mild, we've got a band of wet and in places wintry weather. So it's for the likes of Northern England, North Wales, the Peak District, southern Scotland. Here the focus of any snowfall today, as I say, particularly up over the higher level routes here in Upper Wensleydale, but those Trans-Pennine routes are going to be badly affected by snowfall over the next few hours. And that band of wet stroke wintry weather is not going to go very far at all today. So it's through these areas where we can see further impactful snowfall. But I have to be honest, the threat of snow to lower levels is much more reduced now than it was a couple of days ago. So we saw those scenes from Cumbria. That was freakish. That was unusual because the snow not only was so heavy, but it affected areas which don't normally get that much snow. Yeah, up on the fells, we normally get huge amounts of snow, but not low down across southern Cumbria. So for southern Cumbria, I think the thaw will continue through today. It won't be a rapid thaw, and that's good news. It'll be a gradual thaw. If we have a rapid thaw, that raises the prospect of flooding. So that's some good news. If you live in Cumbria this morning, you're thinking, oh, this snow is disappearing fast. I think it'll disappear gradually through today, and it'll keep on snowing across the higher fells. That snow will be locked up in the fells, and it won't melt and rush down the river valleys very quickly. So that is some consolation. Looking through the next 24 hours, I mentioned that divide between the mild air in the south and the cold air in the north. Actually, that cold air is going to win that battle over the next 24 hours and rush back down again. So by this time tomorrow, guys, we'll all be back in the cold air again. It'll be frosty tomorrow. It'll be frosty again on Wednesday. Not much snow, but cold. And then as we look towards the latter part of this week, the next Atlantic system is going to rush in and trying to oust that mild air again. And that means more rain and more snow for the high ground of northern Britain. So the mild and the cold jostling for supremacy through the rest of this week, meaning a lot of rain and for some more snowfall. So numerous warnings on the Met Office website. If you dare go on there, you might get lost in there. There are that many warnings at the moment. But I think by the end of the week, into next weekend, I think we'll lose the cold air for the time being. For the next week or so, it's rain we'll have to be concerned about. And then as we look towards the middle of the week, middle of the month, that is, middle of December, it gets quite interesting because the cold air stays over Europe. It stays over Russia, intensely cold air there. And there are some indications as we head towards Christmas time that we could see that cold air starting to burst back towards us again. So watch this space.
That's a very
Later on in
heavy
December.
hint. What are you trying to say without saying it?
I'm trying to say it without saying it. Yeah, I think the prospects towards Christmas, let's say, are somewhat higher than they normally are.
Oh, well,
you know,
you see.
White Christmases are rarer than hen's teeth, but maybe not so rare a prospect this year.
Oh, well, as it's chucking it down, well, so snowing like Billy-O, however we want to put it, where you are.
It's lovely out.
I was going to say North Wensleydale. Is that far from Hawes, where they make the cheese?
I'm about 1.5 miles from Hawes.
Oh, now you see, I love Hawes.
World.
If you go to the Wensleydale factory there, they've got an incredible restaurant where you can get everything with every sort of the cheeses that they do. Fantastic. I know what you'll be doing today, John.
I won't be going to Hawes. I'll be getting on the high fells and enjoying the snowfall, I tell you.
Oh, a bit of tobogganing, maybe.
I'll be well equipped. If you are thinking of doing something as foolhardy as I'm thinking of doing today, then you've got to have the right equipment, because although the temperature here in my little village is about freezing, up there it's about -3 and blowing a gale and blizzard conditions. So it's not a day to be roaming the Pennines without the proper equipment.
Yeah, good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. John, thank you very much. Well, do you head back down? Bring plenty of cheese with you.
Yeah, and take some pictures. I'd like to see some pictures of you tobogganing or whatever it is you're off to do.
I will.
Play this out. Thank you very much.
I'll tell you what, if you're ever up in that part of the world, though, when the weather's a bit nicer, go to Hawes. If you're a cheese fan, you won't believe how many types of Wensleydale they make. It's like 20 or 30.
Oh, grommety. Oh, grommet. Where's my Wensleydale?
Oh, it's, honestly, if you're a cheese lover, it's like a day out in heaven, yeah.
Oh, stop. Right, the time is on the dot of 6:15 and you are tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Isabel this morning, and here's a reminder for you of our top stories.
Well, a renewed push from Conservatives to reduce migration as a new poll reveals nearly 2/3 of us believe current migration, illegal and legal, is too high.
This comes as another 519 migrants crossed the Channel over the weekend with no end in sight to illegal crossings.
And looking at some of the other stories heading into the newsroom this morning, and a US warship has shot down a drone launched from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. The American military says there were 4 attacks against 3 commercial vessels in the southern Red Sea. One of the ships was a British-owned cargo vessel. Yemeni Houthis claim they struck Israeli targets. Israel's military says the ships had no connection to them.
The Foreign Secretary, Lord David Cameron, will travel to the US next week to meet Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He'll travel to Washington on the 6th of December as part of efforts to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East, and he'll also be meeting with the Republican and Democrat members of Congress.
And the UK's only giant pandas flying back to China today. Yangguang and Tiantian, Sunshine and Sweetie, to you and me, have been in training for their return. It comes as the decade-long agreement with China to house the 2 pandas comes to an end.
Something about pandas.
Oh, yeah.
They kind of look like humans in panda suits, and just the thought of saying, you know, they're flying back to China, I'm just imagining them doing up their seatbelts on the aeroplane. But it's sad to see them go, but obviously it was great to have them for that time that we had them. I don't know if we've successfully bred from them, or we tried.
I don't know.
I think there were some failed attempts. I haven't followed it closely, but...
But you see, it's incredible how popular, because they've had a webcam running 24/7 for years and years and years, and apparently, because they can obviously monitor who's on it, people are watching 24 hours a day.
We're strange, aren't we, us humans? But look, I do love a panda.
You've got to love a panda.
You can't look at them. They just chow through that bamboo, which, by the way, I have bamboo in my garden. It is, like, the most indestructible thing going. How on earth they digest that is beyond me. And also how they get to be so large on a diet of bamboo. But anyway, pandas are ever entertaining. Feels like he's going to do a roly-poly there. If you're listening on the radio, we're just looking at giant pandas having some fun in Glasgow.
They're just gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Anyway, more on that a little bit later on, actually. Now, after their 7-day pause ended last Friday, because we can't call it a truce, Israel and Hamas are now facing their greatest military and political challenge.
Well, as Israel expands its ground attacks into southern Gaza, killing more than 700 people in the last day alone, there are huge diplomatic pressures now to resume a pause in fighting.
Apparently, 70% of hospitals in Gaza closed following the resumption of Israeli attacks as IDF tanks approach Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, where more than 1 million displaced civilians are currently gathered.
Well, as Iran is warning of the war expanding if Israel doesn't stop its bombardment and Yemeni groups targeting Israeli cargo vessels, there remains a large risk of regional escalation.
Well, let's break this down a little bit for you with the defence editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Good to see you, Robert. Look, we've got to start with the basics here, in that this truce has ended, pause has ended. What do people expect Israel to do, if not resume some sort of operation?
Well, what it's doing is precisely what you've reported. Tanks in Khan Yunis, they might prove to be only of limited value. Bombing from the sky, a tremendous weight of ordnance they've used in the past since October the 7th, 2,000-pound bombs, which is just big stuff. And we're going to eradicate the leadership. That's what the spokesmen are saying. Somehow it doesn't all fit together. You've focused rightly on how the thing could widen with this uptick in activity over the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb, the choke point at the bottom of the Red Sea. But the other thing to factor in is the West Bank, with the settlers, plus some help, they think, from the IDF, or so it is being reported. More violence upon more violence, more than 250 killed there over the past month. I think they've reached what they say in military terms. It sounds a bit remote, but it's a very easy expression to explain: the question for moment. What is a question for moment? When you decide on a strategy, decide on a plan, decide on an aim, and then you go through points, deciding your aim, 1, point 2, how you get your forces together, point 3, the operation, and then point 4 is the proposition we put up in the first place now out of date? Do we have to adjust? And I would claim the Israelis have reached that in Gaza, and we're all beginning to reach that with Ukraine.
Just focusing, though, remaining on the situation for a minute, if you don't mind, on Gaza. Kamala Harris has been speaking over the weekend and just piling on the pressure, I suppose, to try and
more
find a
active than she's been on the public, on the world stage.
For a long time.
Yeah.
So tell us what she's been saying and how significant that is.
Your time expired. That's really what she's saying to Israel. Don't talk about going on for weeks or months. You've got days to bring this to some kind of assessment point. I won't say, that it would be, you would call it a waypoint where you have to check, and decide what you're doing. The problem is that I don't think that they're getting through to the Israeli leadership at the moment, is that Netanyahu has decided that it's a war policy, and he set the aim of eradicating Hamas.
Well, it's also that there's these hostages, and there's huge pressure coming from within Israel on him to go after them. And obviously the British have stated that they're providing support with trying to do these aerial surveillance flights as well in a non-military capacity. But, he's feeling the pressure from at home and from abroad in an impossible position, really.
But that's extraordinary when you mention the surveillance flights, which the Brits are now involved. We've got the base at Akrotiri, and we're well placed. We've got units now in the East Mediterranean. But this is what Israel always claimed that it knew about Hamas, that it had echo sounders checking the tunnels. They could see the movements. We know where everybody is. We know how the tunnel system works. Undoubtedly, there is a tunnel system. They are not showing the evidence that they really knew or know how it worked. By the way, the other thing with the pressure from the families groups, quite right, is this thing that's coming out that actually Israeli leadership was warned by its top-tech cyber surveillance outfit. We concentrate rather overmuch on Mossad, the equivalent of MI6, and Shin Bet, the internal security thing, and they do a lot of the internal analysis about terrorism. But briefly, Unit 8200 is the top cyber surveillance listening unit in the world. And they are now beginning to say there was a consistent drumbeat for a year saying to the Israeli military and political leadership, Hamas is much more capable than you think, and it is going to do something.
Oh, well, that's very big questions for Netanyahu.
Yeah.
On that. Look, Robert, sadly, we've got to leave it there, but as always, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, as you've been hearing us discuss this morning, it's another frosty start to another cold week. Let's get all the details from Ellie Glaister.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from GB News. I'm Ellie Glazier. It's another cold and frosty start this morning across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, with temperatures well below freezing for many of us. But further south, a much wetter picture this morning. Rainfall totals really starting to build up across parts of England and Wales, perhaps causing some travel disruption this morning. And this rain likely to turn to snow across the hills of Wales, the Midlands and into northern parts of England as well. The best of the sunshine today across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, but still feeling cold despite that sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder under all that cloud and rain in the south and west. That cloud and rain continues to affect much of England and Wales overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, continuing to turn to snow across the high ground of the Pennines, and some heavy rainfall likely, particularly across the southeast later through Tuesday morning. Clear skies again across Northern Ireland and particularly across Western Scotland, where it will turn cold again. We could see -6 to -8 across Scotland. However, just staying a little milder under that cloud and rain in the south. Tuesday starts another cloudy and damp day, particularly across England and Wales. Some snow showers continue across the Pennines, but that hill snow and rain slowly clears its way towards the southeast into Tuesday afternoon, with some brighter spells developing from the west. The best of the sunshine on Tuesday, definitely across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but still feeling cold here despite the sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder across the south and west.
Well, still to come, did Farage survive the first celebrity elimination? We'll get the latest from the Gold Coast in a couple of minutes.
Who is it?
We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Uh, 6:27, good morning. She's being absolutely filthy this morning. I don't know why I work with a woman. Paul Coyte... Disgraceful. Paul Coyte's got the sport. Morning.
That's why I enjoy working with a woman. That's all I can say.
Yes, yeah.
Can I just say, in my defence, I've said nothing.
You haven't. It's all him, isn't it?
You know what she was on Friday?
What?
Oh, yes.
With the turkey cook.
Oh, the turkey, yes, yes.
Oh, yeah, that was...
In fact, some would say it was lewd.
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 Honestly, it's a disgrace. No wonder I'm turning grey. Manchester City and Tottenham.
What a game that was. It was an unbelievable game. No, I wasn't. It was because it was in Manchester and it was at the Etihad. But the thing is, Manchester City were expected that you've got Spurs with 10 injuries, you know, and there's this way that Ange Postecoglou is playing, and I've mentioned this before, is that it's very entertaining, it's very exciting, it's just on the front foot. Some people are saying it's naive, but everybody loves it. But going to Manchester City, a lot of fans are thinking, oh, God, it's going to be a disaster. So anyway, Spurs score first, Manchester City come back, it ends up a 3-3 thriller, and that's a phrase I've never used before, the 3-3 thriller, but it really was. It was an amazing game. Now, what's going on there? There's some remonstrating going on. I have all the sports words today. Now, what actually happened was right towards the end of the game, and Spurs had scored an equaliser by Dejan Kulusevski, so we're in the 90th minute, and then Manchester City break. Now, Erling Haaland, you know Erling Haaland, of course, he gets fouled, gets up, and then puts a ball through, which is then chased after by Jack Grealish. Now, what had actually happened at that moment is that the referee said what you can do is play the advantage. So if there's a foul, the referee, if it looks like the ball is going for Manchester City, you can wave play on, so he won't call a foul or give a free kick. He blows the whistle just as he waves play on, which actually helps Spurs. City go crazy. Erling Haaland, I don't know whether we see Erling's... Look at that face. Look at that face.
Indeed.
That is remonstrating of the highest order.
Oh, my goodness.
He is screaming at the... Look at that. Angry Norwegian there, screaming at the poor referee. And so he was very unhappy. That's Simon Hooper, the ref, who looked a little embarrassed, a little unsure, and a little under the cosh because all the Manchester City players were around him. But anyway, it meant nothing. It didn't mean necessarily they were going to score. It was a 3-3 draw. It was extremely exciting. And the reason my throat is like this was from the second goal the Spurs scored.
Oh, tell me more.
There's a bit of that going on. So that's the reason. That's the reason. So anyway, it was a really good day of football yesterday. 24 goals in 5 games. So, yeah.
Absolute stonker. Well, we're going to come back to you in just a second. We're going to pause to get a little update on our headlines, Paul, because the time is exactly 6:30 and you are tuned in to Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Isabel.
So, our main news this morning, there's a renewed push from Conservatives to reduce migration as a new poll reveals nearly 2/3 of us think current migration, legal and illegal, just too high.
Well, it comes as another 519 migrants crossed the Channel illegally over the weekend, with no end in sight to those small boat crossings.
Frosty weather has whipped up chaos across the UK as thousands are without power. The Met Office has issued snow and ice warnings again. Cumbria, of course, particularly badly hit. If you've got pictures, send them through. We'd love to see what it's like where you are. gbviews@gbnews.com.
At COP28, we're asking this morning if it's been a cop out. The UAE is under fire after the organising president said there's no science behind demands for the phase out of fossil fuels.
Coity, there's I mean, Ronnie O'Sullivan is a fascinating figure for so many reasons.
Yep.
And now he's got this most incredible sort of title, hasn't he?
He's now in the UK Snooker Championships. He's now the youngest winner and now the oldest winner. So he won it...
That's something.
It really is. I mean, he won it 30 years ago at the age of 17, and he turns 48 tomorrow. And there's a documentary which is on Amazon Prime, which is made by David Beckham's company, actually, and it's, you know, all behind what it's like, you know, his life, and it really is an incredible story. And he's a player that's been through all the ups and downs, but without doubt the greatest snooker player that there's ever been. And even just a couple of days ago, I was talking about it on Thursday and Friday, and he was going, oh, I stunk the place out, I was a disgrace, I was terrible. He's one of these people, and we all meet these in different jobs and different walks of life, that thinks almost too much about it instead of letting it happen. And the way he plays in a very carefree way, but he's a real thinker, and this is half of his problem, the fact that he thinks so much, and I think he'd probably say that as well. But he's the greatest there's ever been. The oldest, so he's the oldest now, just before his 48th birthday. I mean, we've got golfers like Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods, who were 42 and 48 when they won their titles. And I was thinking about snooker and players, and they always seem to look older. I don't know whether when you look back to the 70s... I don't know, and it's one sport, I guess, where you know, you could probably go on longer because it's less physical. I mean, I thought, have we got pictures? I think we've got some pictures of some old players. I know there was Ray Reardon was one of the greats. Ray Reardon, who was a famous Welsh snooker player. Look, there's Ray in the middle. Now look at all these fellas. Now how old would you be saying?
Well, he looks 50 or 60 there.
Yeah, I mean, that's Ray there. They used to call him the Count. There he is, Ray Reardon. He was 19 years old when that photograph was taken. That was him looking very...
Just to paint a picture, there is a receding hairline.
Yes.
A widow's peak.
A
few wrinkles.
So how old was he then?
He was... I'll tell you how old he was.
Just before you say, I reckon 45.
You reckon 45 there?
Well, he looks older than that.
He does, doesn't he? I think he was about 34 years old there. It's unbelievable. But it's people back in the day...
Yeah. People
generally looked older, didn't they?
Yeah.
You look at old footballers as well, footballers from the day as well. But back to Ronnie, I mean, it was Ding Junhai from China. He won 9-7. You got Stephen Hendry and Steve Davis. They tailed off when they got to about 30. But for Ronnie O'Sullivan, he'll just keep doing it, whether he's enjoying it or not.
He says
but he's
not
winning.
really enjoying it. He's just in it for the money now.
But it's a job, isn't it? I mean, that's what he does, and that's what he's the best at. And as he's winning and keeps bringing in the money... I think probably there's never enough, is there? You know, you'd keep going. You never sort of retire and think, you know what, I'll sit on this.
48's young, isn't it?
48 is young. Yeah. 48 is young, but an incredible player. But then the World Championships comes up at the end of the spring, and who knows, maybe he'll go on because he's won that more times than anybody else. But he's just an incredibly gifted character. But like all geniuses in sport, there's always that flaw in there as well, and maybe that's what makes them great. I don't know.
Maybe. OK, Paul, thank you. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on.
Good, got more for you.
Now, still to come, the world's smelliest cheese, which is called Minger, has gone on sale in the UK for the first time. I could hear Paul retching in the sidelines there. You hate cheese.
Oh, no, any cheese.
But Minger, just good.
God, I can imagine.
I'd give it a go. That and more. We'll have all the details in Headline Makers next. It's like a cheese theme to our programme this morning.
There is. I'm all for it.
Wensleydale.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's on your teeth. It's on your teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
6:37. My voice is going already this morning. It's going now. I'm done. Day 5.
I've got it. The editor of Spiked is joining us. Don't worry, Tom Slater, and we've also got the writer and podcaster Lewis Oakley, and they are here to review our papers. But we're going to start by taking a look at the front of those newspapers this morning.
Yes,
the Times.
Yes, it has obesity in the UK apparently costing us more than £100 billion a year.
Although that's not actually on the front of the newspaper, so I'm not sure.
It must be that top line, is it? I don't know.
That's about Omid Scobie. Never mind. Here's the Mirror. It's leading with Sir Keir Starmer facing a backlash after praising Thatcher.
The Mail reports on Rishi Sunak telling the BBC to cut costs.
The Eye, leading with the story we've been talking about this morning, Conservatives facing a growing threat at the ballot box from Reform UK.
The Express has Conservative Party Chairman Richard Holden saying the Tories can win the next election. Well, I mean,
You'd hope he would say that.
What's he going to say? Really? Let's go through some of those then. With Tom Slater and Lewis Oakley. Morning to you both.
Morning.
Good to see you. Tom, let's start with you. Front of the Eye. I mean, it's fascinating that there's all this pressure. They're talking about the pressure on the Tories from Reform UK. Of course, they talk about Farage. I mean, he's not actually the boss. I mean, he's an honorary president. I suppose it's because it used to be the Brexit Party.
Yeah, and I suppose he's still associated with the party and the brand and so on.
Richard Tice is furious.
I'm sure. But at the same time, it is interesting how Reform UK haven't necessarily been blanketed with coverage, shall we say.
No, they haven't.
They certainly haven't got the kind of funding that the two big parties could rely on, or even some of the opposition parties. And yet you have seen their proportion in the polls creeping up, and it's quite clearly a reflection of real dissatisfaction with the Tory party. And also I think it's a reminder that a lot of those red wall seats that were so decisive last time around, a lot of those voters, they're not sprinting towards Keir Starmer. A lot of them are going back to not voting, being undecided, or going to Reform, and they've once again been a receptacle for anger with the Tory party.
But can anyone on this panel tell me what Reform's plans are to tackle the problem? Or is it just a question of, well, the Tories aren't successful in doing this and there's a lot more noise about this from the right?
I think that's it. I think, well, we've seen what 13 years of the Tories giving it a go has looked like. People that vote for Conservatives feel they can't vote for Labour, so Reform is the next best option.
But who's to say they'll do any better?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. They're untested, and, I mean, you know, the way our voting system works, they're probably not going to get in anyway, so it is more of a protest vote, can we call it that? But I think it is about, you know, we're just not seeing the competency from the Tory government. There's a lot of, you know, a lot of Conservative people I know that will say the Conservatives just aren't Conservative anymore, so they're looking for other options.
It's interesting, the threat to conservatism, because you've got on the front of the Mirror, and we might come on to it in a bit, but we've got Starmer kind of talking about Thatcher trying to steal Tory votes. You've got Reform potentially stealing Tory votes, and yet here we are saying that the Conservatives themselves aren't really Conservative anymore. It's a very interesting and different political landscape than any I can really remember.
We're in a very strange phase when you see the leader of the Labour Party trying to praise that. That, I thought, was a very odd move for no other reason than, you know, if one thing unites Labour's kind of new kind of metropolitan Liberal base and its old voter base in the red wall and so on, it's scepticism of Margaret Thatcher. So
yeah,
I find it an odd thing to...
You could try and bid for Tory votes,
you know,
which they have done overtly now, you know, those people who are dissatisfied. But by mentioning Margaret Thatcher, you just incense another wing, the left wing of the party.
But I mean, look, the first thing Gordon Brown did when he became Prime Minister was invite Margaret Thatcher to number 10. So it's not...
Well, that was a very new Labour move.
You know, if people are being unbiased, it is what you want to see, that a leader could look at people from the past of all different political persuasions and say, that bit over there, that section of it was good. And I think in the comments, I mean, they've latched on to Margaret Thatcher, but he was talking about Tony Blair as well. He was just giving a rundown of a couple of
and
political
Clement
figures.
Attlee, and he was talking about who had a legacy and who actually changed Britain. But I think you're right. She's such a controversial figure, particularly for the unions and the left of the party. It was a strange choice of person to go after.
I think he likes doing these things almost like a reverse virtue signal to his kind of more Corbynista base. You know,
it's funny, isn't it?
Exactly.
Meanwhile, in The Guardian, Lewis, well, we wondered what had happened with COP28 being held in an oil nation. The President says we don't need to reduce the use of fossil fuels.
Yep, so they can all go home, can get back in their private jets and all go home. So he said that there's no science indicating that phasing out fossil fuels is needed to restrict global heating, as he called it. Look, I think, and obviously scientists have now come in and said, you know, this is concerning, but I think, you know, what did you expect? You're holding it in an oil nation. This guy owns an oil company. But what I will say is I think that a lot of British people, I can't speak for all of them, but I think a lot of them are sceptical of COP. They're sceptical of people getting their jets in and all that. So I actually think...
talking shop, isn't it?
Well, it's a lot of talking shop, but I actually think his comments, you know, they might pull a few more eyes into the conference of like, oh, so it's not just everyone agreeing that we all need to be poorer and stuff, that, you know, that there is a bit of a debate to be had at least, and how do you bring together all these countries and say, look, we will do this so far, but we're not going to impoverish the poor anymore, and just finding a good way to do it. So I do actually think it's at least created a bit of a debate rather than people turning off because it's all lots of rich people agreeing with each other.
Does anyone know where COP29 is set to be held?
I
wonder if there needs to be, you know, some sort of, at least some kind of green interest if you're going to be the host. Just an idea.
I don't know. It just seems very, very odd because, I mean, even if you're sceptical of the whole thing, moving away from fossil fuels has got to be a sensible option. And if the COP president's saying, no...
There's no rush, what are you talking about? There's no science in this.
How we do it is the question, but it's got to be done.
Yeah.
What about this in the front of the Times this morning, although we've established it's not the front, is it? Somewhere in the Times, Britain's weight problem costing $100 billion.
Yes, this is an update on figures that the Tony Blair Institute has commissioned. It's being fronted by Henry Dimbleby, who until relatively recently was the government's food czar. There's a czar for everything these days, isn't there? This is one of those things, it's a projection, it's a guesstimate. You compare what people are currently like in terms of their productive lives to what they would be if they were a little bit lighter. But it is pointing out that 2/3 of British adults are now overweight or obese. That's lumping together two very different categories to a certain extent, but nevertheless, that's up from about half in 1993. So it's not insignificant, and of course there's going to be knock-on effects from this sort of thing. But I do think when you think about the economic problems we have, the lack of investment, our inability to build anything, is people being heavier than they once were necessarily the biggest problem. Probably not.
Well, come on, I disagree actually, because it does cost the NHS an awful lot of money, and although there is a difference between being overweight and obese, the problem is people are becoming overweight younger, and so end up being obese when they're older, and it's just not. You don't want to fat shame anyone. But you've got to be healthy. It's all about being healthy.
This is the thing, though. I think a lot of people would agree with what you're saying, but it's, well, what do you do about it? Are we going to slap labels or, you know, those health labels on all of the junk food? Are we going to say that we can't advertise junk foods at certain times? I think it's an issue, but let's educate people. Let's educate people. I also think, you know, the young, I would say, you know, my 14-year-old is always criticising what I'm eating, so hopefully the younger generation are actually more health conscious.
Well, I hope so. I do find it. And don't bother tweeting me or whatever saying, it's all right for you, you're slim. I'm not as slim as I want to be, and I have been on a diet for 30-odd years. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, I can't just eat what I want.
I must say one thing that jumped out to me with this story is 100 billion. Isn't that just what we were reading about the Tories have wasted in like the last 5 years? So I think they got the money.
A lot of these numbers are kind of, you know, sticking a finger in the air to a certain extent. But it is also the question of what are they doing about it, because all these things always become very petty and authoritarian, ban on these ads, whatever.
State debate.
I just don't think it's going to work.
We've got to use... I tell you what, it's down to us. It is down to us employing a bit of common sense that we've got to... We've got to take responsibility for ourselves. Who wants to be, when you're 60, 70, 80, in a position when you can't move, you're stuck in a wheelchair, you can't go out and do anything because you're too fat? It's not good. It's not quality of life. We want to enjoy life as long as we can.
Well, we're going to pause going through headline makers, and we will come back. Yeah,
that's my preaching for this morning.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Well, we're going to speak now to the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Lucy Frazer, who joins us this morning from Westminster. A very good morning to you. I want to start, if you will let me, with our top story this morning. And this is really interesting polling that shows that Reform UK is really eating into some of your traditionally safe seats. And it looks like where you used to have large majorities could well be eaten into by Reform, with Farage being sort of attributed for that large sort of shock to the Conservative Party. I mean, how much of a worry is that, you know, your lack of control of the issue of illegal crossings and migration, one of Rishi Sunak's top pledges, is losing you votes to Reform?
Well, as you say, that issue about immigration, and in particular illegal immigration, is a top priority for the government. And not only have we committed to bringing it down, we actually have already made significant progress on that. So we've seen that we've brought illegal immigration down by 1/3 in circumstances where other countries in the Mediterranean have seen their immigration go up by 70 or 80%. So I would say to those voters who might be thinking about voting Reform, if you want to get illegal immigration down, you need to vote for the Conservative Party, because the only other alternative is a Labour government, and they've got absolutely no plan to stop the boats.
Although we are in the second highest year on record for illegal crossings, and we're hearing from civil servants within the Home Office that your Rwanda plan, this beleaguered plan that the Supreme Court have judged, not to be feasible, they're saying it's just a political gimmick and that you're wasting their time.
I don't agree with it being a political gimmick. All that we've not managed to stop the stem of illegal immigration. We've reduced crossings by the Albanians by over 90%. And of course, we're disappointed with the decision by the Supreme Court. But we accept that decision. And you'll know that we're already taking steps to try and ensure that the Rwanda plan does work. And we've committed to making a further agreement, a treaty with Rwanda, and bring forward some domestic legislation so that we can ensure that we can send people to Rwanda and make sure that policy is put into place as soon as possible.
Well, yeah, look, movement has been happening. Figures are coming down to an extent. It's not stopping the boats, as the Prime Minister promised he would do by the end of the year. And on top of that, people are concerned about legal migration figures being as high as they are. I mean, it's double what they were just a few years ago. Why isn't the government taking more action on that? Because it is down to the visas that are being issued. Why not put a hard cap on it?
You're right. Legal immigration is also too high, and that's why we've taken steps on that as well, including stopping dependents of students coming over, which was one of the biggest challenges that we faced, and we've stopped 150,000 people coming over through that route. And so we are taking steps on that as well.
I want to ask you, in your capacity as Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, about a couple of media stories doing the rounds. This is the front of the Mail this morning, that the Prime Minister is warning the BBC off a really big licence fee increase, the biggest in 40 years, in the spring when that freeze comes to an end. He's saying that, frankly, the cost of living crisis means that people cannot afford to do it. But the BBC, like all of us, and indeed the government, is seeing how much more their expenses have gone up. So what's the answer in all of this?
We're really concerned about the cost of living. You'll know that as a government we've done significant things to ensure that people can continue to afford for their daily expenditure. And so we don't want to see the licence fee going up too much. We froze it for 2 years to protect people from the cost of living. It is due to rise, but we want to take steps to ensure that it rises by an amount only that people can afford. So that's why the Prime Minister made those comments that he did, and we are looking to make sure that any rises are affordable to people across the country.
Well, yeah, look, that all sounds well and good, except it's a two-way street, isn't it? You either have to pay for the BBC or you don't. You can't just cut its money and expect it still to produce the same programmes.
And that's why we're also looking at reforming the licence fee. The licence fee needs to be fair. The BBC needs to have sufficient funds to support its work, as you say. And the system isn't working at the moment because the number of people buying the licence fee has gone down by hundreds of thousands of people over the course of the last year. And so that's why my department has already started to look at how can we reform the system, as you say, to make it fair for licence fee payers, but also make sure that BBC remains sustainable.
I want to ask you about the Telegraph newspaper. For people who've been following it closely, they'll be aware that there is a particular company that is backed and funded by Abu Dhabi who are trying to get their hands on it. So concerned are you that you have prompted an inquiry by the Competitions and Market Authority as well as Ofcom. But I'm interested to see that Lord Hague has come out and said this isn't just about concerns over free speech and also over the public interest, but national security. What do you think he's worried about there?
Well, first of all, can I say I do have a quasi-judicial role in this, so what I can say about it is limited. But what I can tell you is the steps that I have already taken. So, as you say, I've issued a PIN, and what that does is now puts in steps a process for Ofcom and the CMA, the Competition and Markets Authority, to look at this proposed sale and to investigate it, and that is on public interest grounds. That is on the grounds of our concern in relation to free speech. There are also mechanisms, if there are concerns raised, for us to look at things on the basis of national security, and that is something that would be looked at not by me but by other ministers in government.
And are you confident that if the takeover does go ahead, that they will be able to maintain independence editorially?
Well, that's the question that the CMA and Ofcom will be looking at and will reporting to me on. And given my role, I'm afraid that's not something that I could comment on any further.
Yeah, Lucy Frazer, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed. Tom, what's your assessment on that? Because what Lucy Frazer is saying when it comes to the migration issue is, well, we're dealing with it. But I mean, I know it's not it's not her remit, but nevertheless, it's not sufficient, is it?
Well, I think this is the problem, is that the Conservatives have now kind of campaigning against their own record in office on all kinds of issues, and immigration is one of those. There's the illegal immigration issue, of course, but there's also, in terms of their voter base, there's a lot of concern about the levels of legal migration as well, and they can't turn around and say, oh, it wasn't me, Gov, we need to do something about it.
Because it is.
Government for this amount of time, and also we've got a Prime Minister who wasn't campaigning from the leadership from the wilderness. You know, he was the Chancellor until very recently. So I think that message is just not really going to land, particularly with their base of supporters for whom this is a big issue. They can't pretend like they've had nothing to do with how the country has gone.
And Lewis, you know, all this talk about the cost of living crisis, we can't afford this and that. Another £15 million being chucked Rwanda's way on top of the 140 that we've already sent there on a new treaty that possibly won't be able to get off the ground either.
I think people are sick of hearing the word Rwanda now. I really think that we don't want to throw more money after bad, and I don't think the British people actually think that this is going to work. I don't even think the politicians think that it's going to work. Like, we might try this, but I think they just need to, you know, get it under control. If they're saying Rwanda is the only way, then that's where we are. But I think that there's not a lot of public backing, whether you're left, right, pro-immigration or anti-immigration. I think, you know, there's no real support for this Rwanda scheme and throwing more money at it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the thing is that money was sort of going to go anyway, wasn't it? They've just sort of repackaged it slightly. And they are now sending, we're told, the plan is to have British lawyers in Rwandan courts to help ease the process and make sure that it's all, you know, fair, and because the Rwandan courts would do the processing.
I just think some figures to say, see, we're competent after all. It's just not going to happen.
They are going to get another Home Secretary out there to the long list. I think he's heading off over the next couple of days.
Yeah, OK.
And for now, Tom Slater and Lewis Oakley, thank you very much indeed.
Still to come, more on the migration figures. 2/3 of you think it's just too high. We'll look at that in just a couple of moments for you after the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest weather update from GB News. I'm Ellie Glazier. It's another cold and frosty start this morning across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, with temperatures well below freezing for many of us. But further south, a much wetter picture this morning. Rainfall totals really starting to build up across parts of England and Wales, perhaps causing some travel disruption this morning. And this rain likely to turn to snow across the hills of Wales, the Midlands and into northern parts of England as well. The best of the sunshine today across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, but still feeling cold despite that sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder under all that cloud and rain in the south and west. That cloud and rain continues to affect much of England and Wales overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, continuing to turn to snow across the high ground of the Pennines, and some heavy rainfall likely, particularly across the southeast later through Tuesday morning. Clear skies again across Northern Ireland and particularly across Western Scotland, where it will turn cold again. We could see -6 to -8 across Scotland, however, just staying a little milder under that cloud and rain in the south. Tuesday starts another cloudy and damp day, particularly across England and Wales. Some snow showers continue across the Pennines, but that hill snow and rain slowly clears its way towards the southeast into Tuesday afternoon, with some brighter spells developing from the west. The best of the sunshine on Tuesday, definitely across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but still feeling cold here despite the sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder across the south and west.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good morning. It's just about to turn 7 o'clock on Monday, the 4th of December. You are very welcome. You're tuned into Breakfast with Stephen Dixon and Isabel Webster.
Well, this is what's leading the news for you this morning.
A renewed push from Conservatives to reduce migration as a new poll reveals nearly 2/3 of voters believe current migration is too high.
Well, it comes as another 519 migrants crossed the Channel this weekend, so no end in sight to illegal crossings.
Frosty weather has whipped up chaos across the UK as thousands are without power as the Met Office issues snow and ice warnings. Ellie Glazier will have the latest throughout the morning.
It's been a cloudy and wet start to the day for many of us, with sleet and snow in places. Join me later for the full forecast with all the details.
Has COP28 been a cop-out? It's far from over yet. The UAE is under fire as the organising president says there is no science behind demands for the phase-out of fossil fuels.
A renewed focus on southern Gaza as Israel increases their operations in the area as the US stresses the moral responsibility to protect civilians.
Prime Minister looks set to reject a BBC fee rise, calling for the broadcaster to be realistic about how much we're prepared to pay during a cost of living crisis. We'll debate the future of the licence fee later on.
And we have the wonderful Paul Coit here with all of the sport.
I love you. 24 goals in 5 Premier League games yesterday. Third round of the FA Cup, where all the big boys get involved, was also made yesterday. And we'll be talking golf balls. And the word of the day is bitfication. That's bitfication.
OK. Still enjoying the 3-all thrashing or whatever it was.
Yes, I know. I feel like I'm playing Call My Bluff at the moment. Bitfication.
Don't Google it. That's
yes.
Sorry.
I saw you.
Keep your thoughts coming in, keep your pictures coming in. Lots of wintry pictures as well. We're going to get some of those on screen just as soon as we can. The email address for yours is gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can X us at GBNews. So to our top story this morning, and the Conservatives are losing voters to Nigel Farage over the migration crisis. That's according to new polling, with Reform UK now consistently in double digits.
Yeah, a majority of Tory voters now saying reducing levels of illegal and legal migration, which are both at the pretty much the highest levels in British history, is more important than growing the economy.
So what are the prospects for the Conservatives, and how will they fight Starmer to help their left and reform to their right. Not sure what that means. I think we'll get the details from Dan Falvey, who's head of digital for us, but essentially it means that the Conservatives are under threat from the left and the right.
Absolutely. What we're seeing is that Rishi Sunak is being pulled both ways. We're seeing that the Labour Party is high in the polls, and we've seen that now for a number of months, but very recently we've started seeing Reform UK, which is more to the right of the Conservatives, are now creeping up, and that's a real problem for the Conservatives, because they are trying to keep voters happy on one side and on the other. And what's really interesting about that polling that shows about migration now being such an issue for voters is when Rishi Sunak set out his 5 pledges earlier this year, stopping the boats was one. But it's not just about illegal migration. We're seeing that legal migration is also an issue for voters, and that wasn't even a priority that the Prime Minister set out, and he's going to have to really now take action to really bring that down.
And there's no one to blame but himself for that. The government issues the visas.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the problem.
Absolutely. The problem is, though, when you end up with this kind of point where you look at the economy needs some migration because we've lost workers after leaving the EU in areas where we can't immediately replace them. So, for example, doctors or nurses, it takes time to train up, and the government says it has this longer-term plan and strategy in order to do that, which means we won't be reliant on those workers from overseas. But you can't do that instantly, and the government is trying to grapple with how does it do the rhetoric and the reality of that.
And I suppose the polling will be worrying for a lot of Conservative MPs who are in comfortable, safe seats. They'll be looking at their 25,000 majority that they've had over the years and realise that actually reform could take away votes from them and actually give these traditional Tory heartlands, hand them to Labour, essentially, because of our political system. It's unlikely that reform will be able to take those constituencies.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I don't think we're going to suddenly see, we're seeing reform kind of between 10 to 13% of the polls. I don't think we should therefore see that to be them getting 10 to 13% of the seats. They'll be lucky to even get one, to be honest with you. What it does potentially do is split the vote and allow Labour to come through into other areas. The Reform Party, it used to be called the Brexit Party. It did stand in some of the 2019 elections, but it pulled out of a number of seats after the Conservatives warned then that their fears were it was going to split the vote between the Brexit Party and the Tories and let Labour in the red wall. And now that Brexit is done and Reform is planned to stand, that kind of deal that was done, if you like, is gone, and that could be a real issue.
Where are we in terms of, this idea, and it's slightly worrying because it means people are getting sort of very single issue on it, but, this 2/3 of whatever it was, of a majority of Tory voters say reducing migration is more important than growing the economy. We know Labour today are pushing growing the economy as their big sort of agenda setter for the day. Because people might be concerned, but actually growing the economy is absolutely vital to the future of this nation.
Yeah, I think the thing is that as Conservatives, you need to do both. The problem is they currently don't appear to be succeeding on either front. We've seen inflation drop. We've seen the government saying that they're reducing some taxes, but in reality, the tax burden's about to hit the highest it's ever been at. And I think when you look at that and then you place it with migration, that's where the government have got a real issue. They're struggling to be able to claim success on either of them. They keep announcing plans for migration, which they hope will allow them to kind of voters to see that they're taking action and doing something. But the problem is we've had plan after plan after plan, and we're yet to really see any kind of real impact.
And they're on a real sticky wicket with Rwanda, aren't they? Because even if they can get this this treaty is done, and in such a way, and if there's an emergency vote and all the rest of it, that would allow them to bypass the Supreme Court and actually enact the Rwanda plan. The problem is then it has to become a silver bullet. It has to solve the issue, which is very unlikely.
Well, but here's the thing. So Lucy Frazer, when you were talking to her, said that, it's not a political gimmick, but even if we announce emergency legislation this week, as is being expected, it's probably going to be the end of February before it goes through the House of Parliament. That means that it's probably going to be March or April before we start seeing any planes to Rwanda if it all went through fine.
And could they even get it through the Lords?
Well, that's to be seen, but if they did, we're still going to see it's going to be March or April before anything happens. If there was a May general election, which there has been talk about, it would mean that basically Rishi Sunak could claim that he's got this plan in place before it's really been tested and we really know whether it works. So we might allow him to claim a victory without us actually being able to see the results.
You're not suggesting it's a political gimmick then, are you?
Certainly not.
All right, Dan, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it.
You can understand why people are so frustrated, because it is clearly an issue, and it's an issue that concerns a lot of people, so therefore you want to see some action and sensible action taken. and we're just... All we seem to get is, well, we're looking at that, we're working on that, it's very important to us. What's happening?
Well, I think the reason a lot of people will see this as a political gimmick is because they're so fixated on Rwanda. If they actually believed in trying to make it a deterrent and pushing through the policy, they could go to any number of other third countries that they've been pursuing. But they want to try and get, this treaty or whatever it might be, to try and get it to time in with the election. And people suspect that there are a little bit of political football games going on in all of this, rather than the actual ambition to get it.
But on some positive sort of news, I was listening to an expert on migration the other day, and part of the problem we've got at the minute is the vast majority are students and student dependents, which has been all sort of linked in as well, oddly enough, with COVID and the fact that people have stayed and all the rest of it. So they are expecting that number, as high as it is, the way it goes in cities, if you have a high peak of students, then they will leave. So they are expecting that number to drop down to something like 300,000-400,000 within the next sort of 12 to 18 months, which they claim as a victory. Anyone would claim as a victory. We've tackled it. That would happen naturally. Still much higher than it was even sort of 10 years ago when you're looking at 150, 200,000.
I'm intrigued. If you are a voter that has traditionally voted Tory and you are considering voting reform, what is their position on stopping the boats that means that you feel you'd be in better hands under their stewardship on that? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com.
Yeah, and are you comfortable with the idea that the way the system works, you're very unlikely to get a Reform MP, and so you're more likely to get a Labour MP? With that, how does that work?
Yeah.
I don't know. Or maybe it's time for... You just think, well, it's time for Labour to have a go anyway. You're just going to have your electorals say. Anyway, let us know.
Now we're going to talk about the weather situation in Cumbria. 2,500 people still without electricity in these conditions. This is all after this latest icy spell.
Yeah, Fire and Rescue in the lake said it's worked through the night to rescue drivers from cars trapped in deep snow. It's grim to be stuck in a car.
Horrid. Well, the Met Office has issued a fourth yellow weather warning for heavy rain that's going to last until 6 o'clock this evening.
Yeah, that rain likely to cause some disruption to travel and could result in flooding, just in case you haven't had enough of that lately.
Yes. Well, let's get some detail in all of this from senior meteorologist Jim Dale. Good morning, Jim. Good to see you.
And you.
So quite extreme conditions we're seeing up in Cumbria at the moment.
Yeah, it's hardly a good morning up there, is it? Let's face it. In fact, that rain, I can imagine this now, and people are going to be going out in this snow on the ground, ice on the ground, driving rain. I mean, it's an awful mix, isn't it? It's a dangerous mix, to be honest with you.
Bit of an ice rink out there.
Yeah, and people in the south, how can I put this? Comfortable southerners, just a little bit of a rain out there, not a great deal. I know there's a bit more down in the southwest at this moment in time, but nonetheless, you're wondering what's going on. But actually, it is a north-south split. The air masses are very different from the north of the country to the south at this moment in time. So it's turning a little bit milder and more hospitable in the south, but the north have got problems. The papers like to make a big deal of weather stories. They always do, especially the Star. So we got Skate Britain on this one. The Star always do a good weather story, perhaps exaggerated slightly, but I do like the Mirror's one. The first snow hell.
Oh, very clever.
Yeah, rather than just a snow hell. So that's what they've put out this morning. Look, weather sells papers, does it not?
Well, no surprise.
Yeah, and whether we're in heat extremes or this type of extreme, the first thing to say, I mean, one of the things that says in here, drivers trapped in cars for up to 19 hours. We had that last year as well, if you recall.
Did we?
Yep, on the M62 and on the M25, in the south, where we got sudden dislocation of the polar vortex. I'm talking a bit technical now.
No, we love it.
We love it.
Yeah, OK,
dislocation of the polar vortex.
Yeah, which means you get... Yeah, we didn't get that this time around.
Okay.
This was a simple airflow from a very, very cold Norway that's been freezing cold for a month and snow-laden, and the air came down from there, and presto, then we got a system coming in from the west, as it does. The two mixed together, and the north mainly got it, and it was the hilly areas of the north. So, in a way, it kind of was expected. I was on this programme talking about what was coming, and I have a slight problem with people getting caught out, because it means, are they taking heed of the warnings that are out there? There was a yellow. And that was out well in advance. This is the Met Office, and then there's an amber about 2 o'clock, which is a bit late. It was already in it then in Cumbria. But nonetheless, people drive into these rural areas, the mountainous or country areas, and then get trapped. It's a bit like, OK, use a bit of common sense here.
Well, you've got to take responsibility for yourself for as much as you can. Look, talking of climate, but sort of the other side of things, if you like, what do you make of the president of COP28, admittedly from an oil-rich nation, saying the science does not suggest that you need to phase out fossil fuels?
He's showing his true colours, I guess.
But is it right to have that debate? Should we be having that debate? Has the science proved that we need to...
Stephen, that's a really good question. On this station, we do have this debate. We've just been talking politics 5 minutes ago, and we know that Reform UK are climate deniers. So everybody should know that if you're going to go in that direction. That's what they are. That's their label. But in one way, I've been doing this for long enough, and scientists on my side of the equation, the vast majority, would say the debate is over. It's happening now. The repercussions of climate change in terms of the severity of weather, the catastrophes that are going on. Not every single one, but you know, the majority of them, and the extreme temperatures in the sea and in the land. So, look, there'll always be a contingent of people who will argue against black is white and all the rest of it. That kind of happens naturally in any environment, never mind the weather and the climate. I'll tell you what should happen. They should get the Sultan. They should sit him in a dark room with these top scientists. I'll go in there if you want. You know, and shine a light and really give him the facts. He's protecting his own investment, and that's what's happening.
But is that what should happen at COP? I mean, fair enough if that's what he wants to do, you know, but when you're at a climate conference, should he be protecting his own business? And I suppose that will be what a lot of people will now say, you know what, what's the point of COP? And we had this debate last week, where, you know, we had people who are in favour of trying to reduce the amount of consumption of oil, but saying COP's a waste of time.
It was nearly always going to happen, wasn't it? That, you know, you hold a COP28 in an oil state, and you're thinking, you know, that's a bit silly, isn't it? That's a bit... It's Dracula looking after the blood bank type thing. That's essentially where we are with this. So I think it was inevitable that something was going to come out of this nature. And hey presto, it's the president.
It just seems a bit extreme. Good, but look, you've got to... There's an argument as well to say, hold it in an oil-rich nation, because actually, if we go down this path, a lot of these countries are actually going to lose vast amounts of their income, and that has to be... That's got to be worked into the equation.
Yeah, and you know what? It is inevitable. So they're scratching and fighting as best as they can, even if they do it in a quiet way. Some don't, some do, and this has now come out. So I think that's the label that is attached to this guy and that oil state, and that's where we are. We're in this evolutionary or revolutionary state, if you like, and we're having this discussion, this debate, and it's ongoing. But I think we need to get past it, and I think they are looking at their futures and looking down, you know, where they don't want to look. But they need to change. Some of the oil companies, some of the power companies, they're changing their face. They really are. They're going far more green and using the time and this time and place now to actually moving to new areas, and that's where we need to be. But I think in the UAE, particularly Saudi Arabia, you're right in the heart of oil country. You might as well be in Texas, to be honest.
I'll tell you what, it was a shame we haven't got Richard Tice on this morning from the leader of Reform UK, because I'd like to say to him, are you climate deniers? I bet they would say no. I mean, I've never had that discussion with them.
Man-made climate deniers. There's a difference, OK? There's a big difference. Climate deniers basically mean, oh, well, they'll turn around and say the climate's changed all the time, you know, and it has. But it's particularly the last 20 years and particularly the last decade that you've seen temperatures and CO2 like the face of the Eiger, you know, on the graphs and what have you, from eminent scientists. So you're right. I mean, to be honest with you, I feel Richard Tice is running away from me sometimes. I really
we'll
want...
try and make that happen.
Make
Don't
it
you
happen.
worry. I was
I got no
chatting to him
problem with it.
yesterday. So we'll see if we can get that to happen
it would be good
this programme.
in a dark room with some lights.
No. Because, you know, it's all about having sensible adult conversations.
No, absolutely.
And
yeah,
know,
why not?
Yeah, debating things. Jim Dale, always fascinating to talk to you, senior meteorologist. Thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
I saw Richard Tice twice yesterday. He's like a number 12 bus.
Oh, right.
Don't see him for ages, and twice in a day. World's gone mad. Anyway, look, let's have a look at some of the other stories heading into the newsroom at 7:17.
Well, a US warship has shot down a drone that was launched from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. The American military says there were 4 attacks against 3 commercial vessels in the southern Red Sea. It's believed one of the ships that was hit was a British-owned cargo vessel.
The Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, will travel to the US next week to meet Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He'll travel to Washington on the 6th of December. Oh, that's this week, actually.
Yeah.
As part of efforts to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East. He'll also meet Republican and Democrat members of Congress.
The UK's only giant pandas are flying back to China today. Yang Guang and Tian Tian, also known as Sunshine and Sweetie, have been in training for their return trip. I wonder what that involved. And it comes as the decade-long agreement with China to house the 2 pandas is coming to an end.
And the Oxford University Press have unveiled the 2023 Word of the Year, which is Riz.
Oh.
I've never heard
Never heard that phrase.
It's apparently internet slang for romantic appeal or charm, and it's mainly used by young people.
That'll be why we've never...
Romantic appeal and charm. I've got loads of Riz.
Oh.
Anyway, it's one of 8 words on the shortlist, all chosen to reflect the mood, ethos or preoccupations of 2023.
Oh, Riz. Who said romance was dead, eh? The other 7 are now.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look that up. And
I just keep thinking of those, you know, those American, they do those spelling bees.
Oh, yeah.
Be like, Riz, can you put that in a sentence?
R-I-Z-Z.
Riz. Yeah, I know
Doesn't
Riz.
sound like a proper word.
I've got Riz, you've got Riz. You're really rizzy.
Yeah, I need the context. How do the young use that? I'd love to know.
Oh,
You're
young people.
Get in touch. Listen to us this morning.
I feel so old this morning. We were out last night.
We were. Yeah, you were out later than me.
Didn't get home till gone 10 o'clock and then up at 3.
It was a Christmas do, and I got to bed at a decent time, but I'm still a bit tired this morning. But on that note, we're going to check in on the forecast. It wasn't too bad on our journey home. It was a bit wet, but up north, it's a north-south divide, as we were hearing from Jim Dale there. But Ellie Glazier has your forecast for today.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from GB News. I'm Ellie Glazier. It's another cold and frosty start this morning across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, with temperatures well below freezing for many of us. But further south, a much wetter picture this morning. Rainfall totals really starting to build up across parts of England and Wales, perhaps causing some travel disruption this morning. And this rain likely to turn to snow across the hills of Wales, the Midlands and into northern parts of England as well. The best of the sunshine today across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, but still feeling cold despite that sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder under all that cloud and rain in the south and west. That cloud and rain continues to affect much of England and Wales overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, continuing to turn to snow across the high ground of the Pennines, and some heavy rainfall likely, particularly across the southeast later through Tuesday morning. Clear skies again across Northern Ireland and particularly across Western Scotland, where it will turn cold again. We could see -6 to -8 across Scotland. However, just staying a little milder under that cloud and rain in the south. Tuesday starts another cloudy and damp day, particularly across England and Wales. Some snow showers continue across the Pennines, but that hill snow and rain slowly clears its way towards the southeast into Tuesday afternoon, with some brighter spells developing from the west. The best of the sunshine on Tuesday, definitely across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but still feeling cold here despite the sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder across the south and west.
Major choke on X, Twitter, whatever, says...
Where is this going?
I don't know. Says, I tried to think, actually. It says Riz is short for charisma.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
You see, that does make sense. He's also sent a few other tweets, which I won't read down.
Oh,
But anyway,
okay.
but there you go. Yeah, Riz is short for charisma.
OK. I need to find out what the other
There you go.
7
Thank you
words
very
are
much
this year.
indeed
Thank
for that
you.
one.
Stay with us. Still to come, the Prime Minister is telling the BBC to be realistic about the licence fees, worried it's going to be increased too much in the spring. Let us know your thoughts. We'll be debating it after this.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now we're asking this morning, is it time to say goodbye to the BBC licence fee? According to the Prime Minister, the BBC have to get realistic. It's set to rise by a whopping 9% in the spring.
Yes, he wants to sort of ditch that then. He said the annual fee so it should jump by about £15 to £173.30 in April. That would be the biggest single increase for about 40 years.
So is this the beginning of the end for our national broadcaster? We put that to the Secretary for Culture, Media and Sport earlier on the programme.
The licence fee needs to be fair. The BBC needs to have sufficient funds to support its work, as you say. And the system isn't working at the moment because the number of people buying the licence fee has gone down by hundreds of thousands of people over the course of the last year.
I don't know how people would just not pay it. I don't know, anyway. Let's talk to former BBC executive and presenter, of course, Roger Bolton, and someone from Axe the Tax, Andrew Ellison. You can sort of guess what his position is. Good to see you both this morning. Roger, let's start with you. Look, is the BBC worth the money? Can it cope if it's given less money but still reliant on a licence fee?
Well, it can cope, but it'll do less. And what we need to have is a conversation about what we wanted to do if we wanted to exist. By the way, it's not true this is the biggest licence fee increase. This is a misleading headline. The BBC has lost, in real terms, over 30% the licence fee, 30% of its value over the last 10 years. It's been frozen for the last 2 years, and the government has made an agreement 2 years ago to freeze the licence fee for 2 years and then put it up in line with inflation. It looks as though it's going to pull back from that. So it's not true that the BBC has been better funded. It's actually real value its funding is going down. Now, the question is, do you want the BBC to continue? If you do, how do you pay for it?
Well, what's your response to that, Andrew? I mean, I know that you think that the licence fee shouldn't be increased, but, you know, the danger, if you don't, is that the BBC, as we know it, will change. Does that worry you or not?
Well, as has been said, a decision has to be made on how to fund the BBC. I personally think that should be done through subscription and maybe through advertising as well. So I think this is fundamentally a question of freedom of choice. I have various subscriptions with Netflix and Prime and other streaming services. If I use them, then I get value for money out of them. If I don't use them, then I cancel that subscription. But I have been thinking about how many times I've watched anything on BBC television in the last few months, and I reckon I watch about maybe 2 or 3 hours worth of BBC content a month. So for £13.25, that is hardly value for money if I don't use it.
Can I just ask, Andrew, do you watch a lot of foreign content? Because that's the other argument, is that, you know, we can all go to our subscriptions, but you're just going to watch endless stuff from America. And actually, this is a lot of good quality British content would possibly be lost if we don't invest in the BBC. Certainly that's the argument, isn't it?
I watch, well, as a family, we watch a mixture of things. Yes, there is stuff that comes across from the United States, but we also watch a lot of British dramas, and we watch things on ITV, for example, that comes out with some great drama. It's not just the BBC that produces drama, is it? It's, you know, other companies in the UK do that, and other broadcasters in the UK put those on television. So it is a mixture.
It's very difficult, Roger, in the 21st century and the internet age, because that's obviously affecting a lot of this, to see how the BBC can't compete in the market economy. I mean, as Andrew's saying, you know, if they produce stuff that people want to watch, then people will pay for it.
Well, it shouldn't be competing in some ways. It should be doing something different. Do you want children's programmes, original children's programmes, and not just cartoons from America? You need to have the BBC. Do you want regional programming, local radio, which reports on Britain? You'll have to have the BBC. Do you want British drama, which doesn't worry about selling around the world? It's about the way we live and how we are. You need something like the BBC. Now, the problem, there's no decent way of funding the BBC. I mean, the licence fee is a regressive tax. The trouble is, when you look at the alternatives, they're awful. Look at advertising. Mrs. Thatcher looked at introducing that. It would destroy your business if the BBC got ITV. It would destroy if the BBC got advertising. It would destroy you, ITV, and whatever, because the advertisers would go to the BBC, not to you, because the BBC is still massively popular. So if you don't do advertising, do you do subscription? Well, if you do subscription now, there are about 5 million people in the country who would suddenly have no access to the BBC or actually any terrestrial broadcaster. So you can't do subscription now. Do you want a government grant? Dangerous, because that gives the government more power. I think what we're moving to, but it'll take 4 or 5 years, maybe a little longer, is a combination of a basic license fee for services that we all agree are important for Britain to be Britain, and probably then a package of subscriptions. But you can't do it at the moment.
The problem with that argument, Roger, is the assumption. You say, well, if you went to subscription now, 5 million people wouldn't have access to it. I don't quite know where the figure comes from. But even if that's the case, the problem is that it's an assumption then that people have a right to the BBC. Well, if it becomes a subscription service, that changes. People wouldn't have a right to it. It's there if you want to pay for it.
It is, but it's a question of, do you think there's a public service? Do we need public service broadcasting? And this is, I think, the debate we should have before deciding if you need the BBC. Is there market failure, in other words? Are there things that the market doesn't provide? An obvious one is children's programming. If you look at now what is available in terms of original children's programming,
very hard.
Which tells
I can speak from experience.
Doesn't exist.
Just American, wall to wall.
Yeah, so if we want that to exist, how are we going to pay for it? Who provides it? If you want
let's put that to Andrew then. You know, we've heard the argument against subscriptions and against advertising. It would destroy our business and probably ITV overnight. And, you know, you would end up in a very different country without this kind of public service broadcaster. How do you feel about that?
We have to decide what is public service content for starters. For example, I don't think that EastEnders is public service content. I think that what is public service content could be funded through general taxation and the rest eventually move to a subscription model. I do take on board what has been said about moving to a subscription model at the moment. Probably wouldn't be feasible, but as the years go by, it becomes easier to do. And as for BBC Local Radio, I mean, a couple of friends of mine who were presenters on BBC Local Radio lost their jobs recently through the BBC cuts. And I don't think the BBC is really interested in its regional coverage at all.
Well, they were very glad to do that.
Go on, Roger.
Not just that, you know, the government has squeezed the BBC by, you know, over 30% of its income in 10 years. The BBC has to make cuts, and then the government criticises, and people like our guest here criticise the BBC for the cuts it has to make. Blame the people who are the government rather than the BBC. If the BBC cuts something, we all complain, but it has to cut something.
Yeah, although interesting, on that point, if I could just jump in, Roger, because, you know, and I started in BBC Local Radio and local television. I learned everything about the trade by doing that. But why doesn't the BBC go after some of those top salaries that we hear so much about rather than cutting that public service? Incredible foundation for our industry as well. I mean, it's such a loss, I think, for the country to have trimmed that fat instead of those top stars.
Well, I agree. There's scope for doing that. But on the other hand, I mean, for example, when I did feedback, I stopped doing it last year for Radio 4. I got paid £1,000 a show. Well, you know, perfectly reasonable, but not massive. Rather less, I suspect, than you get paid. I think you could squeeze it more, but there is a market. Now, I think there are people at the top who get paid too much, but there is a market, and if you don't pay people the market rate, they'll go elsewhere. And people who believe in private enterprise and so on probably need to recognise that.
OK, look, we've got to leave it there. Andrew, Roger, fascinating to talk to you both. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I can sort of, you know, the government, a government-funded BBC Two style output, if you like, I can see. And then if you want anything else, subscribe to it.
Well, yeah, but it's you know, where does that lead to? Let us know at home your solution to this dilemma. You know, you miss it when it's gone, is what I've always come back to. People, you know, get fed up with the BBC. But, you know, every time there's a royal event or a big event, the BBC does it better than, you can imagine. It's just...
Well, it's because I sort of disagree with that now. I don't think that's necessarily the case. And I have to say the idea that children's programming... Well, I don't want to pay £173.30 a year for kids' TV.
No, but it is a problem. That actually is a problem because my kids just go onto Netflix and watch wall-to-wall American junk.
So?
Well, they don't understand anything. They come up with all these American phrases.
Yeah, but do we need to have... I mean, look, we had...
The only place you can find it is on BBC iPlayer.
I had Floella Benjamin in Play School. And that was it.
Oh, we had Blue Peter and... all sorts of other things I can't think of.
It's not even on BBC One now, Blue Peter, is it?
Well, there's hardly any children's programming on the BBC anymore, but you can find it on the iPlayer and online. But anyway, it's a debate. Let us know where you stand in all of that. GBNews at gbnews.com.
Paul Coyte's here, good morning.
No kids loved Jackanory, though, did they? Nobody liked Jackanory. Nobody liked Jackanory. You'd sit there and go, Jackanory's on.
We did like Mr Ben.
Love Mr Ben.
Mr Tumble, he's brilliant.
Oh, there you go.
Tumble, we don't know him.
Yeah. Oh, no, you're too long in the tooth, love. You see, that's what it is. Yeah.
Hey, go on, what have you got?
Right, Sunday football, 24 games, 24 goals in 5 games. Bournemouth beat Villa and Chelsea beat Brighton and Liverpool beat Fulham 3-2. West Ham and Crystal Palace, just 2 goals in that, but the big one, Man City 3, Spurs 3. Nobody gave Tottenham a hope because of all the injuries and the way that Ange Postecoglou loves to play his football and thought Manchester City...
Kulusevski.
Absolutely, with that goal, he leapt like a salmon, and it was like off his shoulder almost, but then right at the very end, so we're thinking 3-3, it was an amazing game, there was no question about that, and then it looked like the Manchester City were going to break through. Referee blew up for a foul where he should have probably played the advantage. Manchester City were absolutely incandescent with rage, especially Erling Haaland. It's a great shot. And it's just such a great shot. Look at that. That is a very, very angry Norwegian man.
With him.
And the referee is thinking, oh no, look at the... Honestly, if you listen on the radio, imagine the most angry face you could possibly imagine, and there it is. And anyway, ended up 3-3. I think it was a fair result, but it was a 6-goal thriller, and it was a terrific game.
Can we have a look at, I know we're a bit tight for time, but a bit of skiing?
Yeah, we do have a bit of skiing.
And I'm not a skier, I'm not a fan of skiing, but I like the fancy stuff.
I love the fancy stuff as well. Freestyle Ski Aerial World Cup, which is from Kuusamo in Finland. Have a look at this. Marion Tenno from Canada. Now, they leap up. It's when there's just like a big ramp, and then they just spin and turn, and how they land on those skis is unbelievable. The other one is Guangpu Qi from China. So Marion was the female champion from Canada, and... this is Guangpu Qi.
It must have nerves of steel.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
You get one thing wrong and it's game over.
I mean, it really could be.
Radio audience, it's like aero-gymnastics, isn't it?
It is. It's just a huge ramp that goes up. Yeah. They go down the hill, up the ramp, and then it's just how many times you can spin and turn and then land facing forward on those skis.
Humans
are unbelievable.
Amazing.
By the way, I'll tell you a secret.
Oh, go on.
The second one was actually me.
Was it?
Yes, it was. Just in case, I wasn't around yesterday, that was me yesterday.
You've only been skiing twice as well, so that makes it all the more impressive.
Thank you so much.
What was that word you mentioned in the headlines?
Oh, yeah, that word is, that's bifurcation.
Bifurcation?
Bifurcation. It's splitting things. It's about golf balls. I'm happy to save it for you later, but basically...
No, go on.
All right, bifurcation. And Rory McIlroy is for it. A lot of golf players or golfers are anti it. It's because these days, golfers hit the ball so much further with all the technology, with new clubs and also the different balls that they use, it will go much further. And so there's a choice that they have to make is like, do we actually make the golf courses smaller because you've got people like Bryson DeChambeau hitting the ball 400 yards, or do we change the golf ball? And I would imagine it's kind of cheaper to change the golf ball. So the golf balls will not go quite as far as they used to.
So it's rolling back the technology?
It's exactly what it is, rolling back technology. Normal golfers, like you and I, Stephen, and also Isabel, when we go out golfing, Isabel, during the summer, we'll just use the same ones. But when it comes to the pros, they're going to use these different balls. I think they're probably made out of concrete. But Rory's for it. He says it'll bring back the finesse of the game, whereas others are saying, no, we want to be able to blast it as far as we possibly can.
So the punters like us will have better balls than McIlroy?
Yeah, possibly.
Basically.
Yeah, that's it. And that's the bifurcation, is the split between the two balls.
Bifurcation.
It's my favourite word of the day.
Is it?
I feel like Sesame Street.
We'll have bifurcation in the dictionary.
We're brought to you by the numbers 3 and 5 and the word bifurcation.
I think it's already in the dictionary. I don't think he's made it up.
Oh, OK.
I can't believe it. It's more than 2 syllables, so I'm very happy with bifurcation.
Bifurcation. 4.
Yeah, that's not bad, is it? Yeah,
I counted that.
Yeah, very good.
I'm not as green as I'm cabbage looking, me.
What's your word, by the way? What are you?
Riz.
No, I thought you were. Yeah, you're very Riz.
Riz.
Yeah.
That's the Oxford Dictionary word of the... I'll tell you what it was. I was looking back at past ones. Which I quite like. In 2006, word of the year was bothered.
Oh, I'm a bothered.
I'm a bothered.
That's gone.
2004
so passé.
was chav.
Chav. Yeah.
Chav. Still
2009 was simples. Doesn't say much for us, does it, that we're just going off adverts and Catherine Tate shows?
Simples.
The irony that the word was simples.
As fabulous as Catherine Tate is.
Yeah.
But even so.
Right, we've got to move on. We're going to be discussing the Duke and Duchess of Sussex next. Should they be stripped of their royal titles?
Are they bothered?
Are they bothered?
No, I'm not bothered.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, we're going through today's headlines and stories making the news with Tom Slater and Lewis Oakley. And Tom, we're going to start with you talking about the possible nuclear option. This is in The Sun, relating to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex.
Yeah, so this is Tory MP Bob Seeley, who suggested that the Privy Council and Parliament should consider the nuclear option, so moving to strip the Duke and Duchess of Sussex of their royal titles.
It ain't going to happen.
It's not going to happen. It's certainly something which would, if this was ever going to take place, you'd kind of defer to the palace on these matters. They're not going to force their hand in any meaningful sense. But it is a reminder of this ongoing row with the royals, the royal race row around Omid Scobie's book. And I think it does... The reasons these stories get traction, of course, is because of the fact that I think people are walking around, even if they were relatively neutral on the whole Harry and Meghan question previously, we've got a couple who are constantly, either themselves or via journalists who are rumoured to be quite close to them, shall we say, beating up on an institution while they continue to enjoy the privilege that the HRH bestows. You can understand why people are starting to get increasingly irked by it, whether it's Bob Seeley or anyone else, because they obviously do get a lot of value from still having that association with the royal family, having that formal title.
But they'll always have that association, though. Harry will always be the son of the king. That's the point. And the other issue is, of course, that the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex were bestowed on them by Her Majesty the Queen. And really, so if anyone's going to take it off them, it's got to be the king and not anyone else.
Yeah, it seems very unlikely that it would actually happen, but it's a reminder as well of just how damaging this row has been. I know they've tried to engage in a bit of kind of damage control over the years by trying to suggest they didn't actually accuse the royals of racism, they were accusing them of unconscious bias, but I think that's a bit of a distinction without a difference, given the bias you're pointing to is supposedly racism. So I think it's a reminder of how much damage has been done, but as you say, at the core of this is a family, and it's the family who will make those decisions.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. It's a good headline.
It's a shame. I think it just takes away from the monarchy. Should be focusing on, making a success of it now that King Charles is at the helm. How do we modernise it? How do we make it bigger and stronger than before? And every time you read anything about the royals, it's Maggie and Harry aren't happy.
Which is a shame, because actually I think Charles and indeed William and Catherine, and indeed, let's be honest, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, who have really come into their own now, I think they're putting so much work in, not to mention Princess Anne, who never stops working.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great work going on, and this is just detracting from it. Oh, I'm getting on my high horse.
Lewis, you've got a story about AI and how it's going to improve medical scanning under Labour plans.
Yeah, so West Streeting's come out and said that every major hospital will analyse scans using AI under their plans. It will double their diagnostic capacity and it will reduce heart deaths by a third, I believe. And I think this is really exciting news. I know that some people are really worried about AI, but if a machine can catch things that the human eye has missed, or just that we can double the capacity, that we can throw it through the computer.
So long as stuff is checked.
Yeah, checked by a human hand, of course.
Checked by a human hand. But if it just pushes through things a bit quicker.
Well, and it's about staying competitive, because I believe this is inspired by the Australian healthcare system. So we've got to take a look at all the other systems going on around the world. They're believing in this. And I just think that, with that NHS backlog, that just terrible, you can't get doctor's appointments, you can't get an operation. If the machines can speed things up and do a decent enough job that is being checked, good.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. Can we have a look at... this is from Nationwide, Tom. Scammers, fake sellers and all that stuff. I've got to be honest, I've been stung recently.
Have you?
I've been stung. But it was an advert. You see these when you're on Instagram and these adverts pop up when you're looking through the stories. You expect people who are advertising on Instagram to have been checked. And I've got stung by something I paid for that just never turned up. It wasn't very much money, and I've got the money back from the credit card company, so it's fine. But however, it makes me really angry.
No, definitely. And you're not alone. Nearly half of all scams that have been reported to Nationwide have been precisely this situation where someone finds a link online, it could be something off social media, it could be something off Instagram, they go to purchase it and it just never shows up. So it's not necessarily about them harvesting your details and then clearing you out, but just day by day selling products that don't exist, from companies that don't exist. And it's just so easy, especially in this day and age where everything kind of goes through that filter of social media, something catches your eye, Christmas is coming up, you don't really think about it, but it's just a reminder to always look for that little extra level of protection when
it seems to me, linking into the previous story, how AI can be used to the benefit of scans. Why can't AI be used to scan for scams? That feels like another good application for AI. We talk so much about
I don't know quite how it would do it, though, because it's got to be programmed. AI doesn't do it on its own. It's got to be programmed
Couldn't you program AI to scan for scams? I don't know.
I think you should just trust no one, though. I only go to certain place online, and you know what? The other day I decided, you know what? This site looks legitimate. I'll order something. Hasn't arrived, and it's been about 3 weeks. And the email
they all fall
came
for it
back.
eventually.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Some really intelligent people I know have fallen for some of the simplest scams.
Let's just talk about me all the time. I'll tell you what I find, though. Honestly, if you are looking at stuff on those Instagram adverts, what I normally do is then go and Google it elsewhere, and it will come up ridiculous, exactly the same item, about a third of the price.
And also, that's one thing that's really good for double-checking things like this, is there's so many websites now which just have users ranking websites, you know, Trustpilot, things like that. And that's so often the solution is other people rather than AI. It's just people saying, these people rip me off, don't use them, online
I agree.
reviews.
I had an email and I wasn't sure. I had an email from the bank the other day and I wasn't sure if it was legitimate or not. And I was kind of passing around the office like, do you think it's real? Do you think it's... I'm just going to delete it. Because we couldn't decide whether it was legit or not.
If in doubt, delete.
Well, I got one like that and rang the bank. And it was from them in the end, but they actually didn't mind me. I had to be on hold for 10 minutes, but they didn't mind me asking. No, that is a legitimate email. So it's fine. So it's worth checking because you just never know.
Yeah.
Can we talk cheese?
Let's talk about mingers. Minger.
I fancy a minger.
Which is really stinky.
So there's some new cheese out named Minger cheese. It's going to be available in Asda stores. 54 Asda stores are now stocking it. I mean, it sounds disgusting. I was reading this. I haven't had breakfast yet, and it made me feel sick. I mean, I'm not a fan of smelly cheeses.
Oh, OK. Well, if you're not into stinky cheeses, then you need not apply.
But I did think Minger cheese, that would be a great Christmas gift for someone I don't like.
Oh, no. You see,
Secret Santa.
You see, the owner of the cheese company has said it smells meaty, unctuous, cabbagey. Nothing subtle and no nice way to describe the smell, but it's all about the flavour.
Yeah.
Moorish, melts on the tongue with a full-rounded umami taste, whatever that means.
But if you were to describe the smell of, say, Stilton, I would say sweaty socks.
Would you?
A waft of sweaty socks. It's a disgusting smell. The taste of a blue cheese.
You know what's interesting? I couldn't find the price put on this. I'd love to see how much they're taking people for.
How much does a minger set you back?
Oh, I don't know.
These
It
days-
can't be that expensive. I bet they're flogging it like that.
Yeah, and
I'd like to try it.
If you get some stinky cheese that you don't like, the best thing to do is to cook with it because it becomes less pungent. So if you have a Stilton that you don't really like, it goes really nicely with a sauce, whether that be on jacket potato or on a steak. So if you get given some minger for Christmas and it's too strong, stick it on some cheese on toast. Or
Cheese on toast. I was going to say
and cheese.
I tell you what, Stilton cheese on toast is beautiful. Absolutely love it.
Or in a salad.
Minger on toast doesn't sound quite... to be perfectly fair. But anyway, there you go. Lovely, gents. Thank you very much indeed. We shall catch up with you a little bit later on.
Yeah, all-important weather update for you because we've been talking this morning about the conditions in Cumbria. Really difficult. We're being told it's a north-south divide weather-wise. Here's Ellie with all the details.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest weather update from GB News. I'm Ellie Glazier. It's another cold and frosty start this morning across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, with temperatures well below freezing for many of us. But further south, a much wetter picture this morning. Rainfall totals really starting to build up across parts of England and Wales, perhaps causing some travel disruption this morning. And this rain likely to turn to snow across the hills of Wales, the Midlands and into northern parts of England as well. The best of the sunshine today across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, but still feeling cold despite that sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder under all that cloud and rain in the south and west. That cloud and rain continues to affect much of England and Wales overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, continuing to turn to snow across the high ground of the Pennines and some heavy rainfall likely, particularly across the southeast later through Tuesday morning. Clear skies again across Northern Ireland and particularly across Western Scotland, where it will turn cold again. We could see -6 to -8 across Scotland. However, just staying a little milder under that cloud and rain in the south. Tuesday starts another cloudy and damp day, particularly across England and Wales. Some snow showers continue across the Pennines, but that hill snow and rain slowly clears its way towards the southeast into Tuesday afternoon, with some brighter spells developing from the west. The best of the sunshine on Tuesday, definitely across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but still feeling cold here despite the sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder across the south and west.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Still to come, migration causing a huge headache for the Conservatives. Will be live in Westminster for you with all the latest in just a moment.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning to you. It is 8 o'clock on Monday, the 4th of December. This is Breakfast with Stephen Dixon and Isabel Webster.
You are very welcome. Thanks for joining us. And here's what's leading the news this morning.
A renewed push from Conservatives to reduce migration as a new poll reveals 2/3 of voters believe current migration is too high. We spoke to Cabinet member Lucy Frazer earlier on.
Well, as you say, that issue about immigration, and in particular illegal immigration, is a top priority for the government. And not only have we committed to bringing it down, we actually have already made significant progress on that.
Well, Catherine Forster has all the latest for us from Westminster.
Conservatives really worried about what their failure to get both legal and illegal migration may do in the coming election. I'll bring you more shortly.
Frosty weather has whipped up chaos across the UK as thousands are without power as the Met Office issues more snow and ice warnings. Ellie Glazer's got the latest for you throughout the morning.
It's been a cloudy and wet start to the day for many of us, with sleet and snow in places. Join me later for the full forecast with all the details.
Also this morning, has COP28 been a cop-out? Well, the UAE under fire as the organising president says there's no science behind demands for the phase-out of fossil fuels.
A renewed focus on southern Gaza as Israel increases operations in the area. The United States stressing the moral responsibility to protect civilians.
And as a new musical about the life of Princess Diana premieres in London, we ask, is it time to finally leave Diana's legacy alone and let her rest in peace? We'll be debating that very shortly.
And of course, Paul Coyte's got all your sport this morning.
Good morning. 24 goals in 5 Premier League games yesterday, including 6 in the 3-3 thriller at the Etihad between Manchester City and Spurs. And also, Ronnie O'Sullivan becomes the youngest and the oldest UK snooker champion as well.
And we love to hear from you throughout the course of the morning. Lots of you getting in touch this morning. Alan's been in touch about the weather, saying that a family member of his who lives in Cumbria was stuck in his car overnight. He left work at 12 noon on Saturday, got home at 5:20 on Sunday in the morning. 17 hours and 20 minutes to travel the 12-mile journey home.
Horrific.
Oh, my goodness.
You've got anything to tell us, you know how to get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.com. Well, let's start with immigration, should we? Because the government apparently losing support to, of all people, Nigel Farage. Well, we need to clarify that slightly. Reform UK, which is the party that used to be the Brexit party. And actually, Nigel doesn't lead it anymore. He is the honorary president. Richard Tice is the leader. But anyway, of course, Nigel gets the headlines, doesn't he? The concern about it splitting the vote, because Reform UK in the latest polls getting double digits.
Yes, this new poll from BMG being reported in The Independent today has revealed 63% of all voters believe that net migration is too high, and Tory voters now believe that reducing both illegal and legal migration is actually more important than growing the economy.
Well, it comes as over the weekend another 519 migrants crossed the Channel in small boats. That brings the total number of illegal crossings this year to just over 29,000. Earlier we spoke to Minister Lucy Frazer.
Well, as you say, that issue about immigration, and in particular illegal immigration, is a top priority for the government. And not only have we committed to bringing it down, we actually have already made significant progress on that. So we've seen that we've brought illegal immigration down by a third in circumstances where other countries in the Mediterranean have seen their immigration go up by 70 or 80%. So I would say to those voters who might be thinking about voting reform, if you want to get illegal immigration down, you need to vote for the Conservative Party, because the only other alternative is a Labour government, and they've got absolutely no plan to stop the boats.
So just how big a problem is migration for the Conservatives as they begin to bleed votes to both the left and the right? Let's get the thoughts of our political correspondent, Catherine Forster, in all of this. And I have to say, Catherine, we threw the gauntlet out to our audience this morning saying, if you are a Tory voter and you're thinking about voting reform, you know, what are the reasons for that? And so many people this morning just so fed up with the Tories, and they just don't feel like they're getting a grip, and it almost doesn't matter what Reform's policy on this is. They just know that the Conservatives are failing and what they want them to achieve.
Yes, absolutely. Voters really fed up with the Conservatives. And of course, one of Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges is stop the boats. We see it emblazoned again and again. And yet, as we've seen, 512 people came across in December the Channel illegally just on Saturday. So the numbers are now higher for this year than they were back in 2021. Now, the government's right that they're down about a third on last year when they were over 40,000. But still, they're a million miles away from stopping the boats, aren't they? And, you know, 6-7 million a day on putting up people in hotels. Voters are understandably very, very cross indeed. And when the government lost that Supreme Court ruling a couple of weeks ago, the Rwanda plan looks very much in doubt. But the government is now doubling down, because we've heard in the papers yesterday that the government's going to be spending another £15 million in addition to the £140 million it's already given to Rwanda to basically do another treaty with them. We're expecting that Home Secretary James Cleverly will be out there possibly today or tomorrow. They're talking about putting government officials actually in Rwanda to make sure that Rwanda doesn't send anybody whose asylum claim fails back to a country where they may be in danger. But I think to voters, they will just look at this and said, you said you were going to stop the boats. 500 people came over on Saturday. You are failing. And of course, lots of people taking their votes potentially to reform. They're going up in the polls, up at 11%. That could cause major headaches for the Conservatives. And ultimately, it could send quite a lot of seats to Keir Starmer.
Seems very odd in all of this. I mean, obviously, illegal migration is a big issue for a lot of people. And you get the messaging, don't you, saying, well, we just can't have all this many people coming in. However, it's the legal migration figures that are so very high, and the government can't dodge that, can they? Because it's all down to them.
Exactly. The government is fighting on two fronts, really. Illegal immigration, which, as you say, or about 30,000 this year, potentially slightly more, is a tiny drop in the ocean, really, isn't it, compared to the 750,000 net migration figure, which is more than triple what it was when Boris Johnson got that 80-seat majority. And, of course, the Conservatives spent 13 years pledging to get it down, but they don't have anybody else to blame because, during the time that we were within the EU, they could say we don't have control of this. Partly the Brexit vote was to have control of migration. The government said they would get it down. They've done the exact opposite. But of course, the Treasury likes the workers, the Education Department likes the foreign students, the Department of Health likes and needs the workers coming in to the NHS and into social care. So no easy answers. But of course, for all the benefits to the economy, these numbers going up and up and up, they need the infrastructure. So huge demand on public services, which we know are already under huge strain. And of course, we have a massive housing crisis in this country, and the population's expanding at the size of, a city every year. So the government do need to stop saying they're going to get net migration and illegal migration down and actually do it. And they are running out of time.
OK, Catherine, thanks very much.
Now, to my neck of the woods, Cumbria, which has been really badly hit, actually, with all these weather conditions. More than 2,500 people in the finest county in the country are currently without electricity after that latest spell of icy cold weather and snow.
Well, Cumbria's Fire and Rescue Service says it worked through the night to rescue drivers from cars trapped in deep snow.
And the Met Office has issued a fourth yellow weather warning for heavy rain as well. That's going to last until 6 o'clock today.
And they've been saying the rain is likely to cause some disruption to travel and could well now result in flooding, just to add insult to injury.
Let's talk to senior meteorologist Jim Dale, who's here. Jim, good to see you again.
Again, yeah.
Let's talk the lakes to begin with, should we? How bad is it at the moment, and what are we going to see over the next day or so?
Yeah, the lakes are beautiful and covered in snow. It's probably very Christmassy in one respect. They're getting their Christmas early. It's not for everybody. I think we know that. And when you get the mixture now of rain on top of the snow and on top of the ice, that's not very nice at all. I think many people going to work this morning, listening in, going shopping, are going to have a problem in terms of the weather, and they'll be talking about it at bus stops and, how horrible it is. I say now, go back a few days and say in that glorious blue skies and sunshine, and although it's cold, my God, that's a lot better than what it is at this moment in time. Yeah. So, and it's not going to last forever. There's now going to be snowmelt. So I think the next problem could actually be some localised flooding off the snowmelt and off the rain that's actually coming today, tomorrow, not so much tomorrow, but the next day on Wednesday and on Friday.
That melt's going to be comparatively slow, though, isn't it? Which hopefully will reduce the flood risk.
Yeah, it will. It won't help people, pedestrians. You've always got to think of that. You know how difficult it is to walk on pavements with snow and then ice and then rain on top of that. It is a lethal mixture, to be honest with you. But if we're going to look in the longer term slightly, then I'm going to say to you the snowfields will disappear from all but the Grampians, another beautiful area, and the Highlands up in Scotland. It'll remain on the tops there, no problem. But looking at the models that we look at, I think by the time we get to middle of the month, everything's gone. Right. We're staring down the barrel of Christmas, and how are we going to get it back? And I'm going to say it looks like at the moment it's a long way off. And I count snowflakes on Christmas Day. That's one of my jobs. It might well turn colder again. There's some hint of that as we move towards the Christmas period.
So I'm loving these hints.
Yeah, I hope it's not going to be the type of snow that we've seen that's disruptive and dangerous.
The problem is so many people travelling over Christmas.
Yeah, I know. It's a catch-22, isn't it? It's one of them.
Can I ask, because if people are planning to travel over Christmas and they find themselves in one of these awful situations like we're seeing in Cumbria where they're stuck in a car, and in fact, actually, we've had a message from a viewer this morning called Ruth Langsford, Eamonn's wife, saying, what do I do if I'm stuck in the car for 17 and a half hours? Do I run the engine just to get a little blast of heat every now and then?
Might run out of fuel.
All right, so my next book comes out in March, April time, and it's called Surviving Extreme Weather, believe it or not.
Oh, right.
So it's a co-authored book with a survivalist from the United States. I'm not sure it mentions people stuck in cars, but I'll tell you what you should do. If you feel there's a warning out there, and there was for all of this, now, I'm not saying every situation you can avoid. The weather can be chaotic, it can be instantaneous sometimes. So sometimes you do legitimately get trapped for the wrong reasons, in other words, the right reasons, if you like. You've got to have stuff in your car that will survive, it will keep you going. So petrol, number one, or electricity, number two. We've got to say that now. We've got to have that. So the next thing is something to eat, something to drink, obviously warm clothes. My wife was doing a journey and she was going out in a little T-shirt and top, and I said, do you realise if you get stuck, if your car breaks down, you put yourself in, you think, oh, I've got to have the heaters on, I've got no problem here. But it's when your car breaks down and there's no heat. So take those preparations, obviously take your phone with you, so your rescue services, etc. And I always say that the one underlying thing in all of this is your common sense. Use your common sense. Don't put yourself in the worst possible situations if you can avoid it. Listen to the warnings, and this is a good point. Listen to the weather warnings out there by eminent meteorologists, beyond myself, because they count. They're experts and they're trying to make it right for you, and that will go exactly the same with climatologists and what they say about climate change and the warnings they are giving out in exactly the same way. Listen to them. Please listen to them, because they are not making it up as they go along.
Jim, good to see you. As always. Thank you very much. I'll tell you what my tips are. A power bank.
Oh, yes, so you can charge your phone.
Well, I wasn't thinking about the phone so much, though it's a key point. But you can buy now, like, hot water bottles that are electric.
Oh, genius.
So you charge them up, but a power banking, because they last about 4 or 5 hours.
But do they
recharge it.
Every time you get in the car, take it with you? Because presumably if you store that in the car, getting cold every time you leave the car on the driveway.
Well, it'll
batteries don't like. I only learnt that this weekend. Batteries don't like getting cold.
No, they don't like getting cold, but it'll take ages to deplete.
Okay.
So you'd be all right. So if you checked up on it once a week.
It's just being very organised, isn't it? People have so much to think about, especially if they're travelling over Christmas, wrapping those presents, stacking the car high full of those. Make sure, though, you've got those layers and all those preparations and something to eat.
Flask of tea.
Flask of tea.
Saves the day every time.
Winter hot toddy.
No, if you're driving.
Well, not if you're stuck for hours or you're a passenger, you're all right.
If you're a passenger, mind you, you're not meant to have alcohol. You can't have an open bottle in a car, apparently, of alcohol. In the front compartment. It's illegal. So I was told last night.
As you were swigging from a...
No, I don't drink. Anyway, look, it's 8:15. Let's have a look at some of the other stories heading into the newsroom this morning.
And a US warship has shot down a drone that was launched from Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen. The American military say there were 4 attacks against 3 commercial vessels in the southern Red Sea. It's believed one of the ships that was hit was a British-owned cargo vessel.
The Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, travelling to the US next week to meet the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. He's heading to Washington. I keep saying next week, it's this week. On the 6th of December, that's Wednesday, as part of efforts to de-escalate tensions in the Middle East. He'll also meet members of Congress.
The UK's only giant pandas will be flying back to China today. Yang Guang and Tian Tian, also known as Sunshine and Sweetie, have been in training for their return trip. And
Need a good wash, don't they?
They do, dirty bottoms. And it comes as the decade-long agreement with China to house these 2 pandas is coming to an end.
And here you go, brace yourself. The Oxford University Press have unveiled the 2023 Word of the Year, which is...
Riz.
Never heard of it. It's slang for romantic appeal or charm. I think charisma.
Short for charisma, we worked out.
One of 8 words on the shortlist, all chosen to reflect the mood, ethos or preoccupations of 2023. Apparently, Tom Holland, the actor, Spider-Man, great. I really think he's really good, Tom Holland. But apparently he's got the one that's got this going. And he said on interviews and things, I've got no riz.
Oh.
I ain't got no riz.
With his English accent.
Yeah, he's great, though. He's a great actor.
Yeah, his dad used to do the paper reviews for us back in the day, didn't he, Dominic?
Yeah, his dad's really nice.
He's lovely.
You used to introduce him as Spider-Man's dad doing the papers.
He loves that as well.
Yeah, good man.
Right, we're covering the weather a lot this morning, as you might expect. There is a lot of serious weather out there, especially if you're in the north of the country. Let's get all the details from Ellie.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from GB News. I'm Ellie Glazier. It's another cold and frosty start this morning across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, with temperatures well below freezing for many of us. But further south, a much wetter picture this morning. Rainfall totals really starting to build up across parts of England and Wales, perhaps causing some travel disruption this morning. And this rain likely to turn to snow across the hills of Wales, the Midlands and into northern parts of England as well. The best of the sunshine today across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, but still feeling cold despite that sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder under all that cloud and rain in the south and west. That cloud and rain continues to affect much of England and Wales overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, continuing to turn to snow across the high ground of the Pennines, and some heavy rainfall likely, particularly across the southeast later through Tuesday morning. Clear skies again across Northern Ireland and particularly across western Scotland, where it will turn cold again. We could see -6 to -8 across Scotland, however, just staying a little milder under that cloud and rain in the south. Tuesday starts another cloudy and damp day, particularly across England and Wales. Some snow showers continue across the Pennines, but that hill snow and rain slowly clears its way towards the southeast into Tuesday afternoon, with some brighter spells developing from the west. The best of the sunshine on Tuesday, definitely across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but still feeling cold here despite the sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder across the south and west.
Lovely stuff, Ellie, thank you. Still to come, a new musical is premiering in the West End about Diana, Princess of Wales. Should we just let her rest in peace? We're going to be debating that in a couple of minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
.23, good morning to you. Now brace yourselves. A new musical about the life of Diana, Princess of Wales, taking place in London this week. It is, thank heavens, a one-off presentation of the 2021 Broadway musical. Oh, I didn't know that was happening. Anyway, that was subsequently broadcast on Netflix, also home to The Crown, where, of course, Diana features prominently.
Well, it comes as this summer marked 26 years since the death of the former Princess of Wales. The royal biographer Michael Cole says human interest dictates that we must continue to share Diana's story, whilst the etiquette expert Liz Brewer thinks that it's time we stop dragging Diana's name through the mud. Well, let's start with you, Michael. I'm probably inclined to agree with you in the sense that I remember her from living memory, but I also am guilty of wanting to tune in and watch the latest episodes of The Crown, and, you know, I can see that Diana still has a draw.
Good morning, Isabel. Good morning, Stephen. It's regrettable in many ways, and it's hard to bear for the families most intimately involved. But I have to tell you, 100 years from now, there will be grand opera, ballets, plays, television series, books, articles about the lady we're seeing depicted on the screen there, the much-missed Diana. Her spell is unbroken. It's a little bit like the death of Marilyn Monroe, and at Meiling in Austria, the still unexplained deaths of the Crown Prince Rudolph and his lover at that hunting lodge in the Vienna woods. The fascination is still there. I have to tell you, though, I've actually listened to one of the, well, there's the real person doing what she did so brilliantly, so long, 15 years within the royal family. But I have listened, I've heard one of these songs, and I'm afraid it's fairly dire. I mean, it's that rather dreary recitative, you know, song speaking that ruins so many modern musicals. So, of course, there's interest. It's inevitable. She's a fascinating subject. But it's a bit tough to take if you knew her, and even if you didn't know her, but just merely admired her.
Liz, look, I think it's all awful. I've got to say, I think it's really awful and not good for the family, and we should all know better. But it's all our fault. We're putting the demand out there, so people are responding to it.
We're not.
Well, no.
But, we're not. Producers are. Why I think this is in such bad taste is because of what is going on at the moment. And here we have a production for one night only, and they're calling it a premiere, which was a total flop in New York on Broadway, 2021. There were 33 performances, 16 previews, and it came off. That was 2021. Why is it suddenly being shown here? It had the worst preview. The New York Times said, we don't think this is the absolute worst production ever, but, you know, so why is it being shown tonight for one night only? I could understand, before I did the research, I could understand if this was going to be a run of, say, Christmas, New Year, etc. It's one night only. In which case, if it was a long run, no, the investors, you can't pull it because of the money involved. One night only, you could pull it. You could do it on another day, which might be more acceptable. Whether it's pure entertainment or not, that's debatable. I haven't seen it. I can't comment. I would have thought, yes, you know, it is, what is it, 26, 27 years since she died. Possibly she will go down in history like Queen Elizabeth I. We still watch things on this, but I think this is such bad taste. I think if they couldn't make it work on Broadway, why have they brought it here and tonight and at this time of all time?
But Liz, are you
that
saying
is bad taste.
If it had been successful on Broadway, then it would have been OK? You know, as you say, you draw the parallels to endless movies that are still made about queens from centuries ago, and we see all the depictions in movies and films of our British monarchy, current British monarchy, and recently departed.
Right.
You know, British people are fascinated by the royal family.
Yes, but there's a time and place for everything. You have two sons, whatever you might think of one of them, they are still living. And this was this was their mother. And to put on a camp musical featuring somebody who, you know, was their mother, who died in a tragic death. And Michael, you should be aware of that, having worked with Mohammed Al Fayed at Harrods, which is where we met. No, I think there's more to all this. I don't understand why tonight, for one night only, it's being put on. When you say,
let's get Michael back in for a word on this. I mean, there is a question of taste, isn't there, Michael?
I am, of course, as Liz says, painfully and dreadfully aware of this death 26 years and 3 months ago, and I think about it every day. And I'm quite sure her sons do, and everything that Liz says is absolutely right. But as Sam Goldwyn said in Hollywood many years ago, nobody ever went bust by underestimating the taste of the public. And I'm afraid that's what's going on here. There have been attempts in the past. There was one serious play called Truth Lies Diana that tried to examine circumstances around her tragic death, but that was largely ignored by the serious press. The thing is, it is inevitable. There's nothing we can do about it. The fascination of Diana will continue. And there we see her at the Taj Mahal. And that was a very poignant moment. And other episodes in her life. And I don't know whether Liz will agree with me, but I believe that her fascination was that she wasn't a saint. She didn't believe she was a saint. She didn't pretend to be. But she did put people in touch with the better side of themselves, their better angels. And I think that is why she had the impact that she has and continues to have. That I applaud. This show, from what I've heard of it, I do not applaud. It's exploitation. I think art is either good or it's not good. I think that is the standard we have to approach things by. And if, as Liz says, this was a turkey on Broadway, then maybe its Christmas has come too early.
Well, look, on that note, we better leave it. Just we could talk to you for hours both about this one. But Michael, Liz, thank you both very much indeed. Talking of turkeys, Paul Coyte's here. Good morning.
I was hoping I thought you'd say talking of musicals. I thought I was going to sing my way through the sport. Honestly, it was a drama though at the Etihad.
I'm surprised you've got any voice at all.
Yes, I did get rather excited. I try and keep calm. Someone said to me once, and I took a friend once to football who really wasn't into this, and said, how do you get excited? Why is there such an excitement about this? Isn't it just like watching two companies play against each other? And it's not. There's so much, it's brought through the years, but the excitement was fantastic yesterday. Manchester City were expected to beat Spurs up at the Etihad, but for some reason Spurs seemed to be their bogey side. Ended up 3-3 right at the very end. Erling Haaland was brought down, stood up and then passed the ball through, and a foul was called, which Erling was very, very unhappy about. We've got a picture of Erling looking extremely unhappy because it put Jack Grealish through, who could well have scored a goal, although he might not have done. How about that? He may not have actually scored, but Erling was, look at it, incandescent with rage, the referee. But it was a terrific game anyway, and 24 goals in 5 games in the Premier League yesterday.
Is it a sigh of relief for you Spurs fans then?
I think so. It's a very good result, yeah, so I think so. It was because there's so many injuries at Tottenham Hotspur, and under the way that Ange Postecoglou is playing, which is very forward-thinking, very exciting. A lot of people are calling it naive. It's terrific, but with the injuries, they were thinking, it's not going to be good. But it was a good result, and it was a really good game. I want to talk about Ronnie O'Sullivan, though.
Oh, yeah, go on then.
Ronnie O'Sullivan, and arguably, and I will say arguably, Britain's greatest ever sportsman. People don't look at snooker that way and think, well, it's not really, but it is a sport. Yeah. And 30 years between his first championship, winning the UK Championships. There he is winning yesterday. His record 8th title. So first one was back in, we go back 30 years.
Well, yes.
And now, it was at the age of 17, now turning 40, I'm trying to do my maths, turning 48 tomorrow, he's won it again, and he is unbelievable. There's a documentary which is out about him at the moment. Very complicated figure, but an unbelievable snooker player.
And I think that can be such a curse if you think too much.
I think so. This is what
Overthinker.
This is what comes out in the documentary. You see him driving in the car and he's thinking, well, I feel as if I'm not playing well enough. Even in this tournament, just a couple of days ago, saying, I'm stinking the place out. I really shouldn't be. It's not good enough. It's not great. But he still manages to turn it on, and he will continue to play. Most snooker players, when they reach even the age of 30, it starts to tail off. This guy's at 48 and he's still #1 in the world, and that is
30 years is one heck of a record.
It really is. It really is.
Sort of longevity.
And it will continue. It will continue as well.
Another 30?
Who knows?
You never know.
Why not? Why not? Absolutely. Third round of the FA Cup, I want to mention that. That draw was made yesterday. Often have memories of sitting there on a Monday lunchtime, listening on the radio for the third round. This is when all the big teams come in. Some highlights, and that's Arsenal going to be playing Liverpool. Sunderland versus Newcastle, which is the true Tyne-Wear derby, or the Wear-Tyne derby.
Yeah.
First time they've played against each other in 8 years. And the low teams, nobody's drawn a big one. You've got Maidstone against Stevenage, and Manchester City, or Port Vale, I should say. Manchester City draw Huddersfield. So that's going to be the Etihad. So if Spurs can do it, Huddersfield are going to be looking at it,
quite
thinking,
right. There's always
why
hope.
not? Why not?
Now, have you ever driven a forklift?
I haven't, but I do have a friend that sells them. Is that any helpful whatsoever?
No, apparently it's quite difficult to get a forklift licence.
Is it really?
They look a lot of fun to drive.
Well, you can imagine, yeah. Well, look, nothing says the Euros to me than forklifts. And I'm sure you'll agree.
Well, quite right.
Have a look at this. Here we go. The draw for the Euro finals happened on Saturday. It's forklift ballet is what it is. So there's containers that have all the countries, all the flags of all the countries. So the forklifts then put the flags in order of the groups. England have got Serbia, Denmark and Slovenia. Scotland have got Germany, Hungary and Switzerland. And there's all the groups, so they're all put on top in the port of Hamburg. So if you go to Hamburg, you will be able to see those wonderful containers before they're going to be sent out to wherever they've got to go. Only until December the 10th.
That's quite nice, though.
I think it looks terrific. I'd say keep it there until the Euros.
Yeah.
You know, it's a nice thing to see in Hamburg.
Shipping containers are pretty ugly normally.
Exactly.
It's an improvement.
They're not known for their aesthetically pleasing looks.
Oh.
But I think in that situation, it looks quite magnificent. Don't you think so? And that'll go with the 3-3 thriller at Manchester City yesterday.
Hey, I tell you what, you've done well today.
Bifurcation in there as well.
Yes, exactly. Honestly, I feel like Frank Muir, really.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Right.
Bluff.
Yes, OK. Bluff
On that
again.
note.
Yeah, OK, thank you very much.
Smashing. Talking of words, actually.
Yes.
In terms of call my bluff.
Yes.
I wonder what he'd make of this one. Our word today is Riz, because it's the word of the year, believe it or not. We'll tell you what it means in a couple of minutes.
Riz, he'd say. Riz.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It is that time in the programme when we look through the headline makers for you this morning. Sir Keir Starmer is this afternoon going to pledge that growth must now become Labour's obsession as they prepare to take on the government. So we're going to speak to Labour first before we go through the headline.
Yes, I wondered where you were going with that one.
Anyway,
well, there you go.
I've got with the programme now. The Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, joins us live this morning from Westminster. A very good morning to you. Right, tell me more. Bring me up to speed.
Well, my party leader, Keir Starmer, is making an important speech this morning where he says that economic growth has got to become Labour's obsession if he wins the next election. And he says that for a good reason, because in recent years we've had tax burden going up to its highest level for decades, but we've also got creaking public services and stagnating income. So when you put all that together, it's a bad bargain for the people of the country. And the only way to get a better bargain is to get better economic growth, because that's how you get incomes up and you generate the wealth for your public services. So that's at the heart of the speech that Keir Starmer is making this morning.
Got his inspiration for this from Margaret Thatcher, has he?
I think you're referring to the article yesterday where he praised Tony Blair, Clement Attlee and Margaret Thatcher all as conviction politicians. It's not an endorsement of our policy, it is a recognition that these were three prime ministers who effected big change in the country. He's not the first Labour leader to do this. Gordon Brown had Mrs Thatcher to tea at number 10 when he was Prime Minister and also described her as a conviction politician who got things done. Tony Blair said she was a towering figure. It's a recognition of somebody who won 3 elections. But alongside that, he recognised Tony Blair and Clement Attlee as great Labour Prime Ministers who got things done too. And the point he's making is it's very easy when you're a political leader to get buffeted around by events. But if you want to make lasting change, you have to have a sense of mission, and that sense of mission is reflected in the speech that he's making this morning about better economic growth for the country, because we've got to get out of the pattern and the bad bargain that people have seen in recent years.
Listen, you don't have to tell GB News viewers that Margaret Thatcher was a great leader. Many people will agree, but what a lot of people will see and think when they hear that Sir Keir Starmer is talking about her in this way is somebody who's politically naive, alienating a wing of his own party that he didn't need to. He might be trying to steal some grabs from the right, but he could do it without personally naming somebody that did so much damage in the views of the left of your party to the country. I know that Momentum, for example, came out yesterday saying this was an insult and brought shame on the party.
Yeah, and people said similar things when Gordon Brown had her in to tea and when Tony Blair said good things about her in the past. You always get a bit of a reaction like that. But I think Keir is more focused on broadening the Labour Party's appeal, and the blunt truth is there is no route to a Labour government after you've been beaten so badly in the last few elections, other than by appealing to people who have voted Conservative in recent years. And what he's saying is those people have been let down by the Conservatives precisely because we've had poor economic growth, we've got creaking public services, you've had so many tax rises with so little to show for it, and the only way to change that pattern, to change that bad bargain, is to have better economic growth, make sure it's felt in every part of the country, and that way you get people's incomes up and you generate the wealth for good public services. That's the big sense of mission and the change of direction that the country needs right now, and that's at the heart of his speech this morning.
We've been talking migration this morning. There's a new poll out saying 2/3 of voters think current migration, and we're talking legal and illegal, just too high at the moment. Lucy Frazer for the government this morning said, well, if you want to do something about that, if you're one of those 66% think it's too high, you've got to vote Conservative because Labour hasn't got a plan.
Well, look at the record, not the comments from Lucy Frazer. I mean, migration has tripled under the government. Just look at the record. So I don't know why it would be any different in the future from what they've done. I can only look at what they've actually done. Look, I understand the concerns around this, and one thing we are saying is let's get rid of the wage incentive for migrant workers, where right now, under the Tories, it's legal to pay people 20% less than the going rate for the equivalent British worker. Let's change that and at least make it a level playing field for people who want to come into the country. And maybe instead of throwing more and more money after a failing Rwanda scheme, why not take that money and spend it on attacking the criminal gangs who are actually organising this illegal trade in people in the first place? There's two things that might make a difference, neither of which the Conservatives will do.
Although the National Crime Agency have said that they couldn't do that without the likes of schemes like Rwanda, but that's a whole other debate. I just want to talk about something else that Sir Keir Starmer was writing about in this sort of fascinating but surprising article in the Sunday Telegraph yesterday. He also accused the government of failing to take advantage of Brexit opportunities, and yet this is a leader who's also said that once he's in power, he'll be seeking closer alignment. No wonder people call him Sir Flip-Flops. Very confusing message, isn't it?
No, look, it's a recognition that we're not going to rerun the Brexit argument. Whoever wins the next election, the duty for that leader of that government will be to make the best future that we can outside the EU. We're not going to rerun the argument. I think we do need a good, adult, positive relationship with our near neighbours. If you look at Russia's invasion of Ukraine, I think it puts into stark relief some of the things that we've been fighting about in recent years. But that future will not be by rerunning the Brexit argument. It's a duty on any future Prime Minister to make the best future they can for the country after the decision that was made in the referendum a few years ago.
Look, Pat McFadden, good to talk to you this morning. Just before I let you go, as a proud Scotsman, have you tried this Scottish cheese, which is in the papers this morning, called Minger, which is apparently very, very, very smelly, made by a Scottish company called Stones, I think. Have you tried it?
I'm afraid I haven't, but what a name. What a great name.
Great name. Well,
I'll try it.
The last thing, you bet next time, apparently they're selling it in Asda's in Scotland at the moment, so next time you back up, make sure you get yourself a block of that. Pat McFadden, good to see you.
I'll keep an eye out for it. Thank you.
Do.
Meaty, unctuous and cabbagey, it's described as. If that doesn't get you tempted, I don't know what will.
I'm desperate to try it.
Yeah, someone send us some. Listen, let's get the thoughts of Tom Slater, Lewis Oakley on what they've just heard and indeed what's in the papers and the headlines this morning. Welcome back to both of you. First of all, your thoughts on what Pat McFadden had to say, Tom.
Well, I thought it was interesting because the fact that obviously at this point the Labour Party would have to, you know, some outrageous scandal would have to rip through the entire shadow cabinet in order for them to not win the next election, it feels like. But it does point to this underlying problem because of this question of flip-flopping. What does Keir Starmer really stand for? Is he really someone who is even capable of taking a position on the big issues of the day? There seems to be a lot of signalling, like the Margaret Thatcher thing, I'm not going to go too far to the left, I'm a kind of centrist figure, whatever. But when push comes to shove on the big issues of the day, questions like migration, questions of, yes, you want growth, but how do you actually want to bring this about? These are things that it's not entirely clear to people, and that's one thing that is still dogging him as he campaigns, is the fact that you ask voters who they're going to vote for. Obviously, you see this huge lead in relation to Labour, but you ask people what Keir Starmer stands for, and they can't really tell you.
No.
And that wasn't answered.
I thought the migration point was interesting, because actually Lucy Frazer was right when she said Labour haven't got a plan, on the basis that he criticised the government, but he didn't tell us what Labour would do about it.
I thought that there was no detail in anything he just said. I mean, he mentioned economic growth about 5 times. No detail, no clues as to how that was going to happen. The Rwanda thing as well. Let's see what's in Keir's speech later, but I feel like this is the thing. I know that they're kind of like, well, say nothing, because just let the Tories fall on their face, but if people are going to vote for them, we do need to know, what do you want to do and how are you going to do it?
And that's where it differs a lot from 97, because I know a lot of people are comparing it to that. But whatever you think about New Labour, and I wasn't a particular fan, it had a certain dynamism to it. There was a sense that things were going to be done differently. There were people
things would only get better.
Things would only get better, famously. This feels very in the negative. They're not the Tories.
The big difference from '97 is the economy. I mean, there was this momentum and desire for a big change, but the economy was able to enable that. I think Sir Keir Starmer's big problem, if he does win, is actually what can he do? If it's all going to be based on growth rather than higher taxes, well, that's what the Tories are trying to do. So good luck with that,
Just do it in different ways.
Yeah.
OK, let's have a look at the weather, should we? The Star talking about Skate Britain.
Yes, frosty weather is whipping up chaos.
I think it's a weak headline, that.
They could have done something a little bit better, a bit of snow bomb, all those kind of things. But, yeah, so they've issued a warning. They're saying there might not be enough grit for how much snow is going to fall. I mean, we get this every year. But it does feel this year that it is going to be particularly cold. Winter is definitely here, which I feel like we're quite lucky with. It's been quite warm until now. But I think it's just about telling people, be safe. Let's not be alarmist. You leave your house, but be careful. Don't go on ice. I think it's terrible, the stories we've heard about homeless people. Those are really worrying stories. So some people, I think, see these stories like, oh, great, maybe a day off school, or I can work from home today. But there is a serious cost here. It is dangerous.
Yeah, was it in Beeston in Nottingham? It was that sort of area. Who apparently he was offered other accommodation but wanted to stay in his car but froze to death. I mean, it's just horrific.
Had to be cut out of the car, didn't he? Should we talk about where do you want to go? Actually, should we talk about?
Let's talk Rizzy. Let's get Rizzy with Tom.
Let's keep it light.
So
you got any Riz, Tom?
That's not for me to say, really. But what is Riz? This is one of those word of the year. So Merriam-Webster and the US dictionary have named this their word of the year. It's very popular amongst Generation Z. Any guesses what it might mean?
Well, we know. So we can't answer that. Go on.
Oh, you're actually well reserved. So it's short for charisma. So it's supposed to be if we're going to go with its dictionary definition, it's defined as style, charm, or attractiveness, and the ability to attract a romantic or sexual partner. So apparently it's all over TikTok. Thousands upon thousands of people are using this. I had not heard of it until I was given this copy by your producer. I officially feel very old. So that was...
Well, I've got a 14-year-old, and I'm going to tell him off when I get back that I haven't heard this word. All the things he comes out with, and there I was, not knowing what Riz meant.
But I do agree. I think Riz, or charisma, is one of the top 3 most important traits in attractiveness.
You know what I was going to say? That it's nice that this word is top because it's an aspirational word. I think I could do with more Riz, more style and charm and attractiveness.
I think in a world where everyone's obsessed with selfies and image, actually what you say and whether you're funny or interesting is a very underrated, but I think absolutely key trait in someone.
So the kids are all right then?
No, the kids are all right.
I just sort of think, how can the word of the year be an abbreviation? Is what I want to get Susie Dent on to try and work that out. I'm sure she's furious. She's furious. Can we have a look at? It's like that Tom Cruise movie, isn't it? Minority Report.
Yes.
In the Eye, it's a viral story as well, Lewis, about AI policing.
Yeah, I mean, AI is every part of our lives now. Policing is going to be no different. So the Home Office is planning to transform policing with AI. So this will be able to predict and prevent crime. It's a very Minority Report.
Yeah.
So they've been trialling it. They've got a few more trials to do, but they're looking to have this rolled out in 3 to 5 years. And the idea is, I guess, with police not able to police as much as they would like, that it can kind of detect certain behaviours and then, tell them, go and look over here, that kind of thing. But so there is logic to it. Even though we all go to Minority Report, but I don't know. It does make me a bit uneasy. And what are you going to do?
As long as you're not arrested for a future crime.
Well, this is the thing. What are you going to do? You're going to arrest someone because the AI told you they might predict a crime in the future?
Yeah. And on what basis are you going to judge that? Some quite prejudicial sort of categories could slip in. But I do think that sometimes there's this kind of desperation for you've got a public service, you've got an area of industry that isn't doing particularly well. There's problems with, like the police force and how they're policing crime and so on. There's this kind of desire that AI will just be this whiz-bang thing which will come in and sort everything out. And everything will be absolutely fine. Whereas probably just having more police officers would be a good idea.
Well, and more prisons. We'll need more prisons if this is any good.
Well, that's the truth. Yeah, but if it could free up police officers to do some of the other work, then it could be a good thing. We say goodbye to Tom Slater and Lewis Oakley. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
It's a very polite way of getting rid of you, isn't it? I'd be just like, go out.
So professional.
You've done it now. Go home.
And here's Ellie now with your all-important weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather. on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest weather update from GB News. I'm Ellie Glazier. It's another cold and frosty start this morning across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, with temperatures well below freezing for many of us. But further south, a much wetter picture this morning. Rainfall totals really starting to build up across parts of England and Wales, perhaps causing some travel disruption this morning. And this rain likely to turn to snow across the hills of Wales, the Midlands and into northern parts of England as well. The best of the sunshine today across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, but still feeling cold despite that sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder under all that cloud and rain in the south and west. That cloud and rain continues to affect much of England and Wales overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, continuing to turn to snow across the high ground of the Pennines, and some heavy rainfall likely, particularly across the southeast later through Tuesday morning. Clear skies again across Northern Ireland and particularly across Western Scotland, where it will turn cold again. We could see -6 to -8 across Scotland, however, just staying a little milder under that cloud and rain in the south. Tuesday starts another cloudy and damp day, particularly across England and Wales. Some snow showers continue across the Pennines, but that hill snow and rain slowly clears its way towards the southeast into Tuesday afternoon, with some brighter spells developing from the west. The best of the sunshine on Tuesday, definitely across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but still feeling cold here despite the sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder across the south and west.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Oh, both
Go on, you
desperate.
go, you go, you
Oh,
go.
well, because it's a very busy week kicking off in Westminster, as always, but there's a lot of tension around at the moment. We'll get the latest from our political editor, Christopher Hope, in just a moment.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, good morning to you. It's 9 o'clock. It's Monday, the 4th of December. You are very welcome to Breakfast with Stephen Dixon and Isabel Webster.
Well, this is what we've been covering on Breakfast so far this morning.
A renewed push from Conservatives to reduce migration, as a new poll reveals nearly 2/3 of voters believe current migration is too high. We spoke to Government Minister Lucy Frazer about the issue earlier.
Immigration, and in particular illegal immigration, is a top priority for the government. And not only have we committed to bringing it down, we actually have already made significant progress on that.
Frosty weather has whipped up chaos across parts of the UK. Thousands without power in the Lake District as the Met Office issues snow and ice warnings. Ellie Glazier will bring you the latest.
It's been a cloudy and wet start to the day for many of us, with sleet and snow in places. Join me later for the full forecast with all the details.
Has COP28 been a cop-out? The UAE is under fire as the organising president says there's no science behind demands for the phase-out of fossil fuels.
A renewed focus on southern Gaza as Israel increases operations in the area. The United States stressing a moral responsibility to protect civilians.
And as always, we love to hear from you throughout the course of the morning. Keep your thoughts coming in. We're looking for pictures of weather all about the country, particularly in the north, and also your stories. Lots of you have been kind enough to send them in so far. Albert says a cheap foil thermal blanket or even a sleeping bag in the boot is a lifesaver. I was stuck on Rannoch overnight due to snow many years ago. It's not only road treatment. You cannot see in heavy snowfall in the dark. Headlights are blinding, reflecting the snow. Well, that's a really interesting point. Keep those thoughts coming in.
So, this morning, Conservatives are apparently losing voters to Reform UK over the migration crisis. That's according to a new poll where Reform UK is consistently polling in double digits, actually outperforming the Liberal Democrats.
Well, a new poll from BMG that's been reported in the Eye today has revealed 63% of all voters believe net migration's too high. And Tory voters now believe that reducing both illegal and legal migration is now more important than growing the economy.
Well, over the weekend, another 519 migrants crossed the Channel in 11 small boats. That brings the total number of illegal crossings this year to just over 29,000. Earlier, we spoke to Government Minister Lucy Frazer.
Well, as you say, that issue about immigration, and in particular illegal immigration, is a top priority for the government. And not only have we committed to bringing it down, we actually have already made significant progress on that. So we've seen that we've brought illegal immigration down by a third in circumstances where other countries in the Mediterranean have seen their immigration go up by 70 or 80%. So I would say to those voters who might be thinking about voting reform, if you want to get illegal immigration down, you need to vote for the Conservative Party, because the only other alternative is a Labour government, and they've got absolutely no plan to stop the boats.
Well, it comes as the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is looking to former Prime Ministers, including Margaret Thatcher, for inspiration on how to grow the economy, a topic that we just quizzed the Labour MP Pat McFadden on.
I think you're referring to the article yesterday where he praised Tony Blair, Clement Attlee and Margaret Thatcher all as conviction politicians. It's not an endorsement of our policy, it is a recognition that these were three Prime Ministers who effected big change in the country. He's not the first Labour leader to do this. Gordon Brown had Mrs Thatcher to tea at number 10 when he was Prime Minister, and also described her as a conviction politician who got things done.
Well, let's talk to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who's in Westminster for us this morning. Good to see you. Look, it's very clear, isn't it, with obviously the continuing pressure from the Labour Party, and now this, you've got to say, significant pressure from support for Reform UK. The government really is being pulled in two directions, isn't it?
It is rather, and we look back at the Reform UK, the same pressure was put on the Tory party by UKIP back in the 2010s. That led, of course, to this referendum to leave the European Union in 2016. And that same pressure is pulling the Tory party to the right. Richard Tice, of course, a presenter on GBNews, also the leader of Reform, and Nigel Farage in the jungle right now, but he's the president of the operation. Over the weekend, I was lucky enough to be in COP28, Stephen and Isabel, for GBNews. We spoke to the PM on the way there, and I asked him, would he mind, what would he feel if could Mr Farage come back to join the Tory party? And he told me then that we're a broad church. Now, he didn't mean we're a murder mystery drama. He meant that we're open to all sorts of people joining this Tory party. He said the same thing back in October when I asked him the same question. I asked him every 2 months to see what he's saying. He's not moving away from that. He knows he's got to appeal to people from the right of the party, and that's why this week we are probably going to see finally some movement on this Rwanda plan. We're expecting the publication of a treaty which should reassure judges in the UK that people who are sent from the UK, people who arrive here by legal boats, legally arrive here by boats, who are sent to Rwanda, will not be sent back to the country they're fleeing from. That might cost more money. Maybe £15 million could be spent on lawyers supporting that effort. That's a lot of money, of course it is, but that's actually just 2 days' worth of hotel stays if they stay in the UK. So put that into a context, the money being spent on this is billions a year, and that's why they're spending more money to try and make sure this happens clearly and succinctly. The PM did meet with Paul Kagame, who's the Rwanda leader, the Rwandan president, for 15 minutes on Friday. It's very clear now that was to tee up a big week. The second part of that week, before I go back to you, is to make very clear in UK law that migrants arriving here can be sent back to Rwanda. That could well disapply elements of their human rights. So that would be the contentious part. Getting that through the House of Lords after Christmas will be immense.
OK, Christopher, thanks very much indeed.
Now, after 12 years living as the star residents in Edinburgh Zoo, giant pandas Yang Guang and Tian Chan, known to you and me as Sunshine and Sweetie, heading back to China today.
I love that ab-fab take on
Sorry,
that.
I couldn't help myself. There's no other way to say it, is there?
Well, listen, more than a decade-long agreement with China now cost the zoo £35,000 a month. Believe it or not, that's a lot of money. And delivered key advancements in giant panda reproductive physiology.
Don't know what to say to that, really. Well, with global populations thankfully steady, hopes are high that we can keep giant pandas off the endangered list.
And our Scotland reporter Tony Maguire has been to Edinburgh Zoo for us for their final public appearance.
12 years have passed since Yang Guang and Tian Chan arrived in Scotland to a pandemonious fanfare. And just 6 months after they met the public, the panda effect saw Edinburgh Zoo ticket sales spike 50%. But the 10-year loan, extended by the pandemic, has come to an end, and Yang Guang and Tian Chan are headed back to China. In the end, the pitter-patter of tiny panda paws was not to be, but Professor Simon Gerling, head of veterinary services at the zoo, says the wealth of research knowledge gained from the pair is a valuable consolation prize not to be overlooked.
I mean, we would obviously have loved to have had a panda cub, but that was not the main reason for having them here. We were determined to set up an international collaborative scientific community to look at all aspects of panda conservation, and we succeeded in that over the last 12 years.
Leading the way in that research was Kirsten Wilson, a PhD student at Edinburgh University who's made leaps and bounds in the field of panda reproductive physiology.
One of the things I was really keen to do was to develop a giant panda pregnancy test
And so even though we've not had success with having cubs here at the RZSS Edinburgh Zoo, Chan Chan and Yang Guan have still managed to contribute hugely to that research, which has been really good in terms of finding out more about their reproductive physiology.
Let's not forget, who could possibly miss them more than the keepers who looked after them day to day? As a senior animal keeper, Michael Livingston was present on their first day at Edinburgh Zoo, and he's still by their side, right up until their last. Emotions have been building over the last week.
They aren't pets because, you know, they're wild animals, but you know, we definitely have a bond that we've built up with them, and that they've also built up a bond with us. So we have a nice working kind of relationship, and it'll be very odd and different with them not being here.
Michael joins a group of handlers and vets chaperoning Yangwan and Qianshan back to China, where they'll be transferred into the care of the China Wildlife Conservation Federation and settle into a month's quarantine at the China Giant Panda Conservation and Research Centre in Ya'an, Sichuan Province. Everyone who's worked closely with the pandas has spoke fondly of their unique personalities. Yangwan and Qianshan will be sorely missed, much more than the hefty bamboo bill they leave behind. Tony Maguire, GB News, Edinburgh.
Oh, they're so beautiful. They're so beautiful.
But they do look like they are men dressed up.
Give over.
They do. There's
Give
something
over.
human about them. I don't know what it is. I know I'm not alone in this.
Please.
There's sort of a comedy factor to them. They're wonderful, and I'm so pleased to see that the conservation work at the serious side of
I thought you were so pleased to say, so pleased to see them go.
No. I think it's great.
It's heartless.
I'm not.
Anyway, let's head to Edinburgh Airport, should we? Because Tony Maguire is standing by for us there. Look, Tony, we understand they've been in training for some time for their journey. Have you any idea what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly when I was talking to the trainers, I referred to it as crate training, you know, like many people do with their puppies to get them used to the safe confinement of their kind of crate. Now, certainly the pandas at Edinburgh Zoo, well, for the last few weeks, they've been sleeping in their crates in preparation for this long-haul flight. This is going to be a direct flight from here to China, and they are going to be loaded in just behind me at Edinburgh Airport, where they will hopefully be having a nice restful journey. And certainly the trainers, it's an interesting bunch that's going to be joining them on this. There's going to be some veterinary doctors who have overseen their care at Edinburgh Zoo, some of the keepers and the trainers who have spent, as I mentioned there, day in, day out with the pandas, training them, keeping them company and tending to their every needs. And there's also going to be the Chinese contingent who are going to be getting the pandas handed off to them. So quite a bunch to join the pandas at Edinburgh Airport. Quite a busy part of the airport, as you can see. Hopefully they don't miss their place in the queue.
Gosh,
Oh, let's hope not.
you know, we heard them talking there as well about the fact that they struggled to conceive during their time at Edinburgh Zoo. Presumably they will continue in that plight back in China, because there is, although the population's sort of stabilised, there is obviously a big drive to try and increase the numbers of pandas still.
Yeah, that's correct, and certainly, you know, as you heard there from Professor Simon Gerling, while it would have been nice, and certainly I think that's what a lot of the public were focusing on, you know, while they were here, we actually developed the first ever panda pregnancy tests, a set of 5 of them through various research proposals, and that is going to help pandas and the veterinary scientists around them, help them understand their kind of conceiving better and what's restricting them. It's also worth saying that one of the pandas actually suffered from cancer and had to be operated. Yang Wang was operated on a few years ago now, and certainly that ended up ate into their reproductive opportunities, shall we say. But as you say, yes, their Chinese government are looking to reintroduce them now into the bamboo forests, and I believe over the last couple of years the only restricting factor has actually been the regeneration, because these pandas eat up to 38 kilograms of bamboo shoots a day, which is quite an appetite.
Almost. I tell you what, I mean, look, it's an inevitable day, but a sad day nonetheless, I think. Tony, really good to see you this morning. Thank you.
Now we're fast approaching 9:30 when we will be having Britain's newsroom. But I was going to say,
will be
here
having
they are. Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner have snuck in during that interview there. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
To see you both looking fresh.
Not feeling that fresh, are we? Monday morning. Yeah, we're raring to go.
Fresh,
What, are you fresh?
Fish.
Too many parties at this time of the year.
Yes.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
you were hitting the bottle last night, Bev, I have to say.
Stop it.
And you
Moving on.
And you didn't have time to shave this morning, did you?
I didn't, no. No, I didn't, no.
We're talking about the BBC licence fee because the BBC have obviously taken complete leave of their senses. They think in a cost of living crisis they can raise it by 9%, biggest rise 40 years. Some say the biggest rise ever. Rishi Sunak, according to my paper in the Telegraph, and most papers, says he's going to block it, and I think he should.
So it should go up, they want it to go up at the BBC to £173 from next year. You could argue, I have to say, I know this is not a popular opinion, but I do believe in the BBC. I do believe in the fact that we have a broadcaster that doesn't have adverts. And actually, it's often little ones watching the children's channels on the BBC.
Don't start with that, Bev. Don't start with that.
And the elderly?
Roger Bolton was on. We debated this earlier on. He said, well, where else do you get children's programmes? Why should I pay 180 quid for all your kids to watch whatever it is? CBeebies. I don't want to pay for that.
Yeah.
But buy a subscription if you want your kids to watch it.
They closed down some of the channels. They were going to close down BBC 6 when I was on the Telegraph back in 2008. They were going to close it. It's still there.
But
they reopened BBC 3. They closed it and bought it back.
I do
Who's watching it?
I do like local news. I like the local BBC provision of news in your area. I like a local newspaper. And I also, a lot of the elderly like the BBC. Things like Antiques Roadshow, the repair shops.
Yeah,
some
but
of
they
that
struggle to pay it, the elderly,
nice.
because they're on a fixed income.
Yeah.
£175 is a lot.
Why can't you do a subscription service? That's what I think.
Probably.
If you want it, pay for it.
And we're also going to be talking about Rwanda. Oh, another 15 million for Rwanda, on top of the 140 million. Are we ever going to get anyone over there?
Peanuts.
Well, it would be all right if we sent anyone there.
Yeah.
But
just another Home Secretary heading out.
We've got Mark Francois on Tory MP, who's right. He's got the pulse of Tory MPs. I think he'll have quite strong views on all of that.
And it is peanuts, but I mean we've given a lot of peanuts, and it actually has built up to a rather large.
2 days of hotel bills.
Yeah, and who'd have thought Rishi Sunak? Keir Starmer, is channeling his inner Mrs Thatcher. We're talking to...
Is that desperate, do we think?
It's an own goal, to be honest.
A big own
really
goal,
backfired.
Well, we're very... Piers Pottinger is with us this morning. Not only has he worked for a former chairman of the BBC, he used to work for Mrs Thatcher, so he'll be quite interesting on Keir Starmer. I'm the new Thatcher. No, he isn't.
No. Well, you've got one Iron Lady with you this morning.
I'm all in favour of Iron Ladies.
Didn't expect Starmer to be...
Have you got your handbag with you, Bev?
No, I haven't got my handbag. I haven't even got any shoes on yet. Don't tell everybody.
Goodness!
And Steve,
Sandy Shaw.
Have you got your handbag with you, Steve?
No, always.
You haven't got your handbag.
Well,
it was late night.
I hot-footed it into the studio from...
a bit of a GBNews flash, just in case people were wondering why everyone's falling apart.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, lovely. Thank you.
Great.
Look
Thanks,
forward to the
guys.
show. It sounds fabulous.
Now, we had a huge response to our debate about Princess Diana. Whether we should... there's that new music... Well, a musical which is doing one night only tonight, and then all the Netflix stuff and all the rest of it. Should we still be sort of playing on her memory? Looking at your views in just a moment.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, if you were watching about an hour ago, we were debating whether or not it is really time to let Princess Diana rest in peace. Or people should still be making money off the back of her.
This Netflix thing has annoyed me, actually. The Crown thing annoys me. I've got to be honest. I know it's really popular. But this, I didn't realise that apparently she comes back as a ghost in it.
I haven't seen that yet, but I have heard.
For heaven's sakes.
Well,
what about the boys? Leave them in peace.
I'm sure they don't watch it, to be fair. I'm sure they don't. And there's lots more harm being done by the Sussexes, some could argue. But we had a little ding-dong between Liz Brewer and Michael Cole earlier, and their response, well, it's been big this morning, hasn't it?
Yes.
Lots of you getting in touch with your views. Let's take a look.
Although I wasn't a Diana fan when she was alive, there's no mistaking the tragedy of a sudden death of a young mother. But as for remembering her, yes, we must always remember her, but not in ways of entertainment. Not musicals, singing and dancing about it, not films, not The Crown. Let's just remember her with statues and things like that.
No, I don't think we should, and I don't think she'd really want that. But what we have to do is make sure that it's tasteful and respectful to her memory.
It would be nice to imagine that a musical would deliver a celebration of Diana's life and honour her name. But her short life was often dramatic and filled with heartache. So producing a musical, which could potentially be dark in patches, seems in bad taste. It just seems to me like this is another opportunity to rinse the royals.
Isn't it really about time that we let that tragic lady rest in peace, instead of resurrecting her memory in some tacky musical? From all the reviews, it sounds like a tacky musical. So I wouldn't want to be spending money to go and see it, but really, it's time to let her rest in peace.
Well, there you go, unanimous. Let her rest in peace. I agree with that absolutely wholehearted. If you want to look back at her life in another 50, 60 years...
Too soon for you.
Fine. This is all too soon for me. Way, way, way too soon.
We've also been talking about the Minger cheese that's been in the papers this morning. Darryl says, I've been buying it, believe it or not, for the last 2 years in the Windsor Farm Shop. I'd say it's on a par with Stinking Bishop. Lovely, if you like a strong and smelly.
I really fancy that, I really do. We're back. No, I'm not in, actually.
I'm back.
Tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock. Britain's Newsroom is next.
Good morning, welcome to your latest weather update from GB News. I'm Ellie Glazier. It's another cold and frosty start this morning across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland, with temperatures well below freezing for many of us. But further south, a much wetter picture this morning. Rainfall totals really starting to build up across parts of England and Wales, perhaps causing some travel disruption this morning. And this rain likely to turn to snow across the hills of Wales, the Midlands and into northern parts of England as well. The best of the sunshine today across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, but still feeling cold despite that sunshine, with temperatures widely in the low single figures. However, just a little bit milder under all that cloud and rain in the south and west. That cloud and rain continues to affect much of England and Wales overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning, continuing to turn to snow across the high ground of the Pennines, and some heavy rainfall likely, particularly across the southeast later through Tuesday morning. Clear skies again across Northern Ireland and particularly across Western Scotland, where it will turn cold again. We could see -6 to -8 across Scotland. However, just staying a little milder under that cloud and rain in the south. Tuesday starts another cloudy and damp day, particularly across England and Wales.